Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started with our council session. We will begin with an invocation by Reverend Santino A. Lewis from Clifton Park Baptist Church of Silver Spring. Please rise as you're able.
Amen. Let's pray. Gracious God, we do come to you this morning giving you thanks for bringing us back once again to this place to do the people's work. As we open this session, we do invite your presence, asking that you would give us wisdom and discernment to do good work. We thank you, Lord, for each council member, the communities they represent, and the people that will come before them today. And in particular, God, as we celebrate and commemorate Black History Month, we do, Lord, ask that you would bring to our remembrance the great contributions that Black people have made to this county over the years, and that you would allow that to compel us then to do good work even now. And so we ask it all in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Reverend Lewis. Now we are going to move on to general business. Any announcements, Ms. LaMarcy?
Thank you. Good morning. The council is seeking applicants for the Montgomery County Planning Board. There are actually 2 positions that are opening. Deadline for application is April 24th at 5 p.m. Information on the application process is on the council's website. The council did not receive any petitions this week.
Okay, thank you. Acknowledgement receipt of petitions. I don't think we have any petitions. And so the minutes for February 1st, 4th, 5th, and 6th have been distributed in advance to all council members. Are there any corrections? Hearing none, those are approved. And also minutes for closed session minutes of February 5th have been distributed in advance. Are there any corrections? So hearing none, those are accepted. And now we're on to consent calendar. Is there a motion?
Second.
Council Rice and seconded by Vice President Katz. I don't see any lights. So with that, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous among those present. Okay, now item number 4 is Board of Health introduction. Resolution to adopt Bill 2-19, Health Lead in Drinking Water Schools as a Board of Health regulation. Public hearing is scheduled for March 19th at 1:30 p.m. I also do want to mention that Councilmember Jawando is not able to join us today because he did have I believe a death in the family that he's attending to, so that's why he's not with us this morning. Okay, so we are now going to proceed with a council commemoration of Black History Month, which is always a really joyful occasion, and so excited with the program that is before us today. I think that it's so important to not only reflect and celebrate, but also have opportunities to engage in meaningful conversations. Let me say that, for us, racial equity and social justice are what we strive to achieve here in Montgomery County. Recognizing February as Black History Month is one small way that we continue our work on this urgent moral and socioeconomic endeavor. It is during this month that we pause to recognize and remember people and events in the African diaspora and the struggles and sacrifices made by African Americans to shape the United States. It is also a time to celebrate and honor the achievements and leadership of African Americans who have contributed significantly to the growth and development of our county, our state, and our nation. This month also shines the spotlight on our respective roles in this shared history and forces us to recognize the unconscionable and horrific acts of the past which still shape our society today. This involves difficult and uncomfortable conversations, but those need to be had. In the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. We are fortunate to live in a community where we can engage in these conversations, grounded in our values of understanding, tolerance, and respect for individuals of all races. These values are continuously under attack by forces that seek to divide our nation. We rebuke these aggressions and continue to stand up for the values that we believe in, and we join together to push forward seeking racial equity and social justice. For today's video program, the council worked with the community representatives to remember and honor our county's history through the African American Historic Sites Project and the creation of the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. The goal of these initiatives is to preserve our shared history and to learn lessons from residents who have shaped these communities. I want to especially thank and recognize the work of those profiled in the video, including Ms. Dina Clark, Charlotte Cofield, Mr. Warren Fleming, Ms. Anita Neal Powell, and Ms. Patricia Tyson. Highlighting these initiatives have only strengthened my resolve to turn the lessons of our history into action. We will continue the work of creating a racial equity and social justice policy for Montgomery County, and all of my colleagues in the leadership of this county have begun that work already. Our county's population has changed, both in numbers and in diversity, and this did not happen overnight. Addressing issues of racial equity is not only a moral obligation, it is essentially to ensure the continued economic vitality of our county. It is so uplifting to serve with so many extraordinary leaders that have already committed to this work. I think that we all understand that it is important to commit ourselves to envisioning and operationalizing policies to institutionalize new models of governing that use the lessons of the past to create a more equitable future. We can no longer simply give lip service to social justice, and I encourage all of you in this room to help us engage in the tough issues associated with this type of systemic change, and to let us know your thoughts about how we can build an even better and stronger Montgomery County that meets all the needs of all our residents. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Council President Navarro. And I first want to start off by acknowledging that Councilmember Jawando could not be here because his grandfather on his wife's side did pass away at the age of 93. They're in New York right now for his homegoing celebration. And it really is a part of the tradition in our Black community that we honor our folks that have passed. And while Councilmember Jawando wanted to be here, he is celebrating the Black history and the legacy of what Michelle's grandfather certainly meant to their family and to their children. And so I just ask that we keep him and his family in our thoughts and prayers. Let me talk about Black history from my perspective, because, you know, it's one in which every single year when we think about what we want this program to be, I'm always reminded of the history and what that history means for us in our community. But I was listening to something on the radio as I was coming in, and it reminded me that Black history is created every single day, every single moment. You know, the fact of Councilmember Jawando and I actually being a part of this council is Black history. It's the first time we've had 2 Black men serve on the Montgomery County Council. Councilmember Jawando is only the 4th Black person to serve on the Montgomery County Council. As I start to give you those history numbers and you say to yourself, we're in 2019, and I continue to tell you about history, it says something about how far we still need to go if we are truly talking about equity and equality in our communities. We continue to celebrate firsts every day, and that says something. It says something about the rich history of racism that has limited folks from being able to achieve and accomplish the very things that so many of us take for granted. It's one in which, you know, and it's interesting, as my faith is deeply rooted from the South, my mother continues to remind me that while she struggled to be able to be seen as an equal, she never let that dampen her spirit for understanding that we as a people need to be together. We need to be one as a community, and there is no separation between us. I was reminded of that on my travels to Ethiopia just a few weeks ago. where across the world, some of the number one things that they were teaching children in a school that had dirt on the floor as their classrooms, and they went to bathrooms in an outhouse with a hole in the ground, were learning algebra and talking about equality and equity and taking care of your fellow man. It's something that, again, reminds me that why is it that the United States of America invests and does business with so many other foreign countries and continents, but doesn't do much when it comes to Africa? I've never seen us talk about economic development opportunities in Africa with our black brothers and sisters. And I say there's so much more that needs to be done. There's black history to be made in terms of forging relationships across the globe and ensuring that if we talk the game of having one people, that we actually truly live out that spirit of one people, one world. And so I look forward to this day. This is not doom and gloom. It's one in which it just says that we have work to do. And so I look forward to continuing to roll up my sleeves, but not to be silent. Because if we're not talking about these things that we know are still important to us, that still are challenges that keep us from getting to that objective that we want to be, which is having us together as one world, as one people, we have to make sure that we're knocking down some of those barriers. And so I'm I'm looking forward to the presentation today, especially to hear from our young people, to hear from them about what they see on the horizon and the future, what they see is the potential for us in terms of what we as a world can become and how we together can make this an even better place for all, and know that all folks will eventually have the ability to be successful and truly live in a world of equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rice. I do want to acknowledge that we do have the President of the Board of Education, Ms. Shebra Evans, with us today. She will also be part of the panel. And we have the student member of the Board of Education, Anania Tarikonda. We have also Casey Anderson, who's the chair of the Planning Board, as well as Planning Board member Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I want to acknowledge that Ms. Odessa Shannon, who is the first African-American woman to joined the Board of Education, was planning to be here. She got in a little tiny accident, she said, in the parking lot, but she said she's fine. And she just wanted to send her regrets. And of course, we have Ms. Joan Kleiman from Senator Van Hollen's office here as well, and really appreciate everybody who is here today to join us. We are now going to be, and we're in for a treat, we're going to watch the video that was prepared by our Council's Legislative Information Office on the African American Historic Sites Project and Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission.
The Montgomery County Council joins together each year to celebrate Black History Month. We are a diverse community with more than 1 million residents.
And nearly 18% of our population identifies themselves as Black or African American.
The African American community here is multifaceted. While many of our residents are descendants from slaves going back hundreds of years, others are new immigrants. Preserving their history, culture, and identity is important, while never forgetting the injustices of the past.
Black History Month, held each February, is a time for us to shine a light on our African American community.
It is so critical for us to understand what has taken place, what has led us to where we are today, and celebrate the accomplishments as well as those contributions of the African American community. Because as the county continues to grow in diversity, it is so important for all residents to see themselves reflected in the celebration and the acknowledgement of its history and its past.
This year, we are highlighting 2 initiatives focused on preserving Black history in Montgomery County. The first is the African American Historic Sites Project. The project is designed to identify significant sites in the county churches, cemeteries, schools, neighborhoods, farms, museums, and more, and create interpretive historical markers and other teaching materials to educate residents about the important history found there.
It is very important because it is information that we believe and we know that must be shared with Montgomery County.
Right now, you really don't see a whole lot about African Americans in Montgomery County, and we've been here since 1822, and so we really wanted to actually to educate people about who we are and what we have done in this county.
The project is to bring the African American communities into view because it's been pushed aside for ages.
Young people are not aware of the history of America. And we've come as far as we have because of what has happened in the past. It may not have been good. The good, the bad, and the ugly all came together to weave a pattern of what America is all about.
And all the sites that we have identified actually the people who lived in these places came from a plantation. When the Emancipation Proclamation was written, the slaves had they had to have a place to go. And these places was where they start building homes and also start moving with their families and growing their families. And it stayed that way until desegregation.
So when I was the African American liaison officer to County Executive Doug Duncan, Anita Neal Powell and I were working on projects to identify all historical sites in Montgomery County in terms of a map.
County Council always put on a Black History program. Several years ago, George Leventhal, he was a council member at that time, and he really wanted to focus on Montgomery County African American sites and places. So a map was created. It was called an interactive map.
And then later on, at another Black History Month in the County Council Chamber, we talked about that during one of my presentations, and then afterwards Tom Hucker asked me about have they been identified in terms of where people can find them, and I said no, just on a map.
Once I found out about the work that had gone into the mapping on the planning website, to me it made perfect sense to make sure everybody, as many people, saw these contributions as possible by putting them in physical markers on the sites that were of historical significance in Montgomery County.
The funds were allocated by the County Council, and the work began. The members of the African American Historic Sites Project Committee include 5 longtime county residents who are descendants from slaves. All volunteers, they bring their expertise to the project, and along with a team from the Montgomery County Planning Department's Historic Preservation Office, the County Council, and community members and stakeholders, they are researching, writing, and creating the interpretive signs. The first 5 have been selected and will be placed soon. Each site has a fascinating history.
If you were Black and during segregated time, you had to come to Rockville to go to school, to go to junior high school, and junior college. It was a second of 3 buildings that were used for Black students to attend school because, of course, you know that during segregation, Blacks and whites did not go to school together. And it's currently used by the Crusader Baptist Church of God.
So the cemetery was really historic first. And I think because the church had been burned down and then was reconstructed, so the cemetery is the original, so it's a lot older than the church is. The church was my mom's church. My mom was Christian and baptized in that church. And in addition to that, what most people don't know is that in that field next to that church is where the Negro Baseball League played.
The significance of the home is that it's the oldest African-American home in Montgomery County. Inez was a humanitarian. She fought for the people that was not able to fight for themselves. She had a wisdom about her with politics, rules, regulations, and she knew how to go through the system and to get things done by the law. She helped get the busing up to Damascus. She helped get the white-owned only signs removed, and she allowed African Americans to start being served from the back to be served in the front.
At that time, it was segregated community. I'm a product of the two-room schoolhouse. We had the pot-bellied stove, we had outdoor privies, one for the boys and one for the girls down through the woods. We didn't have running water. Our playground was the dirt driveway. It actually took them 26 years to pave our streets. We were fighting for paved streets. In fact, they built a whole community of Rosemary Hills with paved streets and all of the amenities that go with communities before they even attempted to work with our community.
We were segregated, but we were still integrated in society in our own way. And we never lost a step. We were, in fact, many times we seemed to be ahead of what everybody else was doing. But we did it unto ourselves, and we enjoyed what we did. It was quality, first class.
So the Mount Zion community, in most communities, not just Mount Zion, you almost always had, a cemetery connected to the church, along with a school. Once the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, then the plantation owners sold plots of land to their slaves. And then their slaves, communities, they were formed.
These locations are just the beginning of the African American Historic Sites Project. During this upcoming year, more than 35 markers will be placed throughout the county.
Another initiative that the Montgomery County Council, the Office of Human Rights, the Lincoln Park Historical Foundation, and other stakeholders are embarking on is the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. This commission is taking the lead in educating the community about lynchings against African Americans. In the U.S., there were more than 4,000 lynchings between 1880 and 1940. At least 3 occurred in Montgomery County.
We have a specific name for this type of systematic domestic terrorism and murder of African Americans. One of the most heinous forms of it is called lynching. But I think that word falls short of conveying the sheer brutality, the terror, the grotesque and violent nature of these public murders. This is a horrific reality of our shared history as Americans, one that we need to remember.
The Office of Human Rights, Director Stowe will provide staff support to a commission that will bring together not only our schools and our Arts and Humanities Commission and our college and our county government, but also community leaders, activists from many walks of life to create that community dialogue and to help us understand and achieve remembrance and reconciliation.
It is our hope then that with this resolution that we're able then to put together a team of folks to look at Montgomery County's history critically, honestly, right forthly.
The Commission is also partnering with the Equal Justice Initiative, based in Montgomery, Alabama, and the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project in Towson, Maryland, to recognize these victims. The plan is to place historical markers and collect soil in Montgomery County where the lynchings occurred, as well as create educational materials in an effort to combat racial terrorism and promote social justice.
So it really is important for us to participate in this for multiple levels. One, in acknowledging and making sure that people understand about their history, understanding that there were some dark times that were here in Montgomery County, just like across up and down a majority of the East Coast into our South, but then also about how we can now learn from this, how we can take the lessons from those types of dark times and say, how do we rebuild? How do we make sure that folks have a trust in their community?
But to get to the root of structural and institutional racism, the county is taking a more intentional approach by working on a racial equity and social justice policy for county government.
Unless we have structural components within the way we do our work here in the county, we will not be able to begin to dismantle the structural decisions and institutionalized structures that have led us to those disparities. So this is really the first step, and it is to adopt legislation at the end of this year to establish an equity policy in the county so we can hopefully begin then to see some real progress.
Teaching the community about African American history is especially important when educating our children. And Black History Month gives us an opportunity for them to learn and reflect.
I feel like some people tend to forget about that, and that's kind of helping to remember and remind people that Black History Month is still important.
Sometimes we forget that what happened in the past, like slavery and all that stuff, and I think it's a good reminder that we weren't always the nation we are today, and that some people took some steps to make it happen.
Black history, not just the month and the celebration, is a highly emotional topic for all Americans of all races. So I'm hoping that as time passes, we'll gain a better understanding of not just Black history, but Black present and Black future.
And again, thank you to Ms. Tina Clark, Ms. Charlotte Caulfield, Mr. Warren Fleming, Ms. Anita Neal Powell, Ms. Patricia Tyson, and Mr. James Stowe for participating in this amazing video that I hope people will show it in all kinds of different places. Very inspired by the comments of our young people at the end of the video as well. And so now we're going to have a panel discussion about different themes, and we have an amazing, amazing panel this morning. So I'm going to invite Ms. C. Marie Taylor, who is the president and CEO of Leadership Montgomery. We also have Ms. Shebra Evans, the president of Montgomery County Board of Education, and please join us at the table. Dr. Darianne Pollard, our president of Montgomery College. We have Mr. Elijah Wheeler, Deputy Director and Social Justice Director for Montgomery County Collaboration Council. We also have with us Carolyn Lowry from the Wheaton Network Builder, Impact Silver Spring. And we have Mr. Nate Tinbite, student of Montgomery County Public Schools, as well as Rashani Ward Williamson, student of Montgomery College. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you. Excellent. So, we're going to start with Ms. C. Marie Taylor, and just if you can talk to us a little bit about just the systems of inequity and structural racism and the work that you've done, real groundbreaking work through Leadership Montgomery here in the county, where residents and many of the participants in your program really have begun to explore and truly peel back the layers, if you will, in a very extraordinary way. So if you can share with us some of that. And there is a button at the base of the microphone, so when it's your turn to speak, just push that. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So I want to begin with a quote from Martin Luther King. "We are not the makers of history, we are made by our history." So as we know, by the early 1800s, enslaved Black people accounted for close to 35% of the population for Montgomery County. So as we talk about history, it's important to talk about the community that helped develop it. Often in our rush to change, we forget to look back to figure out how we landed in the situation that we're in. And that's why we repeat many of the same mistakes. So 4 years ago, when I assumed the role of president and CEO of Leadership Montgomery, the first thing we did was take stock in our history of who we included in our work and in our vision. While taking stock, we quickly saw that we discovered we needed an equity lens to all of our work. We started at the top and worked our way through every single program, every staff and board member, our marketing materials, our mission, our vision, and finally our values. We knew that if we wanted Leadership Montgomery to look like the county, we had to make drastic changes as our history demanded a new path. Constantly, we're using lessons from history to help us put us on a new path for a more equitable and inclusive future. It's a challenge and it's always not embraced, but we're committed to the work and to living our values of action, integrity, diversity, engagement, inclusion, and growth. To strengthen a county that contributes to racial equity, we need to focus on how individuals and groups are connecting, organizing, thinking systematically, bridging, and learning as part of a dynamic leadership process that mobilizes action on a scale needed to address racial injustice. This is why we're dedicating a large portion of our program expansion to our race equity workshops and the upcoming Real Inclusion course that'll be offered as a non-credit course through Montgomery College. We're honoring our past and providing the community with the opportunity to normalize discussions on race and anti-Black racism. We're offering and design programs that provide organizations with the awareness, skills, and critical thinking space needed to identify and implement practices that lead to racially equitable outcomes. So we know the topics of race and racism in all forms, and the call for equity is vast and requires years of education and dedication. So we chip away at it every single day. We're giving honor to the Black and brown people who live and died here by educating our participants on their impact of shaping this community. We're taking time to take them to places, many of them that you saw in this video, like the kinship communities that were formed in the 1800s, the Boys Negro School, Sandy Springs, and many of the other places that we saw in the video, where many enslaved African Americans lived. We're helping them to have tough discussions on race and racism. And in our daily pursuit of educating the community about the makeup of our institutions, be it public, private, education, civic, or nonprofit, we have a duty of recognizing that at all levels, we've created and maintained systematic racial inequities as provided by our economic, health, and educational outcomes here in this county. From this work, we began and realized that everyone in this room and beyond can play a critical role in either contributing to racial justice or reinforcing the prevailing patterns of racial inequity and exclusion. We all need to change our thinking, systems, and action in order to become part of the solution for racial inequalities. So by implementing a racial equity lens to our systems, we're finally recognizing the significance of a race of people that helped found this county. And we must remember that failing to pay attention to structural racism within our institutions leave unchallenged issues that undermine the effectiveness and the sustainability of Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really groundbreaking work that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for being here. So we're now going to talk a little bit about interventions, observations, best practices, recommendations perhaps in different spaces. And we'll begin with education. We'll start with Ms. Shebra Evans, who is the president of the Montgomery County Board of Education.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I just really appreciate the opportunity. And I wanted to start off by first saying that I could not be here if it wasn't for Miss Odessa Shannon, who you mentioned earlier. She was the first African-American woman to be elected here in Montgomery County, as well as serve on our school board. And as I've been told, after being elected the president of the school board, that I am the first African-American woman to serve in this role. So yes, thank you. I stand on the shoulder of greatness. I don't have any prepared remarks. I just really kind of came to have a conversation with you all. As you know, I have two daughters in the public school system, a 7th grader and a 10th grader. So just very committed to this work to make certain that all of our students, including my daughters, 162,000 students, just receive a quality education. So as school board members, you know, the main item that we're charged with, we're policymakers, right? So we are trying to make certain that with our our equity policy that we already have in place, that we are trying to make certain that underrepresented groups are being looked at, that if they're underserved, that we're doing things to make certain that we are servicing them, as well as our students are not being easily identified by their race, by their gender, by their socioeconomic status. So I just want to first state that we're starting off with our policies, just taking a look to make certain that those communities that are often not considered are being engaged as we're making these policy decisions, because we want to make certain that there aren't any unintended consequences. So then I'll just kind of go on to early education. That's really big. And what we do know, with your support, we've been able to fund early education right here in our county. A good bit of the early education is invested by our parents, and most of those parents are low income, middle income parents that have difficulty. They don't have tuition assistance, so we really believe in early education. We've been able to have pre-K centers that we've piloted recently, the Montgomery McDonald Knowles Center, where we have like 98 students that are now receiving early pre-K programmed assistance, so that when they enter kindergarten, they will have a level playing field and be able to have the advantages that we want all of our students to have. You know, we had a study that was done, a choice study that was, we had an audit of our choice studies, our programs here in Montgomery County, and when we were able to see that opportunity and that access that we thought was happening actually wasn't happening. So we wanted to be able to open up seats for more of our students to be able to participate in our program. So what we're doing now is we're doing universal screening. We have our third graders and our fifth graders being tested without parents having to know about this information. We're communicating it to them, but previously it was based on teacher participation or just parents knowing. So now, regardless of what our parents know, we want to make certain that we're testing all of our students to know that they're able learners, that they're able to do the great things that we know they can do. And for our students who are not able to get into our gifted and talented centers, we've tried to make certain that how we're being equitable is that we're looking at the cohorts that are already in their home school. So creating spaces and places for our students to get that advanced enrichment right there in their home school. Typically, kids of color are not represented in our advanced placement classes and in our international baccalaureate courses. So what we're doing now is what we call the equal opportunity schools. We have we're being intentional. We're making certain that our staff is getting that training to be able to identify students who are typically underrepresented. We want our students to know that you can do this, you can be successful. And so what I can say that last school year, 2017-2018, we're out of 6,000 students that took the AP and IB courses, 4,000 were underrepresented that we typically hadn't been able to identify. So we're really being intentional here in Montgomery County. My colleagues and I are very proud of the work that we're doing. We want to make certain that kids of color who are typically being suspended at higher rates are being kept in school, that they can be a success. And so we're doing restorative practices. We've received a grant. 85 of our schools are participating in restorative practices. The teachers and staff are getting that training. Our students are being made aware of how they've kind of disturbed or how they've been a part of the conflicts, and we're trying to help restore them so that they can be able to have conversations, be made aware of the damage that they may have caused to their peers, to their community, in their schools, and just kind of helping them to be aware of how to interact with their peers, right? To make them feel human, right? When I was growing up, I had neighbors that held me accountable. I had teachers that knew my aunts and my mother. So I had people holding me accountable, people who I felt cared about me. And so we're just trying to make certain that our staff is really being intentional about building relationships with our students so that when they have an infraction or have a disciplinary issue, that the first thought is not to suspend them, but to have a conversation, to see how their day was, to see what's going on at home that may have caused this occurrence. And just want to talk a little bit more about the opportunities that we're having for our students in the summertime. We are going to pilot 2 schools, elementary schools, where we're going to have extended learning opportunities for them. They're going to go the full year. And what we're able to do is to prevent that summer slide. We know that some of our families that are not able to, they'll be able to get additional enrichment opportunities. They'll be able to get summer programs like field trips that they may not otherwise been able to get. So we're just very proud of the opportunities that we'll be able to create for our students in the area of career pathways. I'm proud to be a board member with 8 women on the board, right? Yes. So we've heard that we've made history by having 8 women. And I don't know about you, but that's pretty normal. We always do great things, right, women, right?
That is true.
Yeah. Nothing out of the ordinary for us, but we're just really committed to making certain that regardless of who you are, that you will be able to be successful, and we're just being really intentional. So I just thank you, President Navarro, for having us here today, having us take part in the Racial Equity Institute, so that we're doing that groundwater work, not the fish, right?
Absolutely.
Not that fish work.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're trying to do in Montgomery County Public Schools, the groundwater work, where we're making certain that all of our students, regardless of who they are, where they come from, that they are able to get a quality education.
Thank you.
So with that, I just want to thank you.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Thank you. All right. Now we'll hear from Dr. Pollard, president of our wonderful Montgomery College.
Well, good morning, and delighted to be here. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to offer a few comments. And I will say there is something pretty magical in my mind about seeing a Board of Education that is composed of all women. Not to certainly say that there is anything powerful that men don't do, but I happen to think there's something sacred about the collective energy of women, so I can't wait to see what comes out of the school board as a result of this leadership. I'm more grateful also that I live in a county that chooses to live its values out loud. The fact that we are here today and the fact that we live in a community that is taking the time to do the work around racial equity, a community that believes deeply in making sure that we are investing in the resources, investing our resources in our youth and helping to ensure that no one is left behind, I think is something that deserves to be celebrated. And I continue to be amazed that I have the privilege to live in this community, but also the privilege of leading your community college. And I can't think of a better time to celebrate that than Black History Month. Certainly, when you said your comments, Shebra, I was thinking I'm the first African-American woman to be the president of Montgomery College. And what's kind of amazing to me about that is that I know I stand on the shoulders of so many people who allowed me to be here, and certainly who continue to wrap their arms around me to ensure my success and to make sure that our mission of community colleges and the mission of this community college continues to be one of radical inclusion. That idea that we're deliberate and intentional about ensuring that our policies, procedures, and practices and our promises ensure that no one is left behind in the work that we do at the college. The urgent mission of community colleges, I believe right now, is one that cannot be ignored. In the case for radical inclusion, this idea that we will be willing to make ourselves uncomfortable to ensure that everyone has equal access to the work that we do at Montgomery College is something that's important. And for us, we've adopted what I believe to be an 8-point plan about how we're going to do the work. I won't give you examples of all of them, but I think the framework is important because I think it's an interesting merging of the presentations that we've heard thus far. How do we manifest radical inclusion at Montgomery College? First, I think it has to be around policy. Intrusive board policies around student success, culture maintenance, civil discourse, mission clarity and evolution, freedom of speech, expression and inclusion, and protections for what speech can mean, what we allow our employees to call themselves, how we begin to align our practices with outcomes, and the belief very deeply that a board understands that policy has to drive practice. And if we're going to have radical inclusion, we must have a framework to do that work. Secondly, when we do this is through data. We are intentionally unpacking and utilizing data that acknowledges and responds to and crafts solutions about student success across race, across gender, across socioeconomic status, and other characteristics as well. It makes no sense to just have the stories, but if you don't know what the stories represent, then you have a significant issue. And oftentimes in education, we clump data together and we talk about success data without disaggregating it. So the fact of naming the Black and brown students, the achievement and opportunity gaps that we see in the K-12 space, they don't disappear when they come to the higher education space. So it's incumbent upon us to have a level of what I like to call raw courage and good trouble. To understand that these are the types of things that we must be engaging in. Third prong of ours has been organizational development and professional growth. A robust complement of formal and informal opportunities and analysis that drive organizational learning and improvement. It makes no difference to us that we provide curriculum that is diverse and represents the experiences, lived experiences of so many people in this globe without us having thoughtful conversations about how people experience the organization once they come into the organization. How we are growing employees, how we're helping them to be bolder, to be more thoughtful and responsive, intrusive in the work that they do, and helping to ensure that all students are being able to be successful. That is what organizational learning demands. A fourth, and what I think this type of panel represents, is community engagement and dialogue, a systematic and broad-based effort and actions to lift up emerging communities while also raising up existing communities that are in transition. For 70 years, Montgomery College has had the glorious opportunity to serve thousands, tens of thousands of residents who live in this community. Yet I would offer to you that if we're going to be intentional about the work, we have to ensure that the college is now not simply waiting till folks come to us, but that we're turning ourselves inside out, that we're going into the communities that traditionally would say, does the college exist for us? 5, and I love the fact that you included students on this panel. Because they are not only the future, they're our present. And the fact that we are intentionally lifting up student voices and their experiences, creating spaces where we can have a myriad of student experiences and voices and activities, but also in the decisions of the organization as we evolve to rise up and meet them where they are. That, to me, is probably one of the most significant things that we can do. It's the ultimate insult, I think, to plan for communities, but not to give communities voice in that planning. And we oftentimes, in our best efforts of thinking that we're helping someone, we realize that we aren't listening to them. We're planning for them without planning with them. So as a result of that, our work in working with students is paramount with that. 6 is communications and social media, making sure that our social media communications are multilingual, we're using multiple platforms, and I like to say that we're using conscious messaging that supports our mission, vision, and commitments to our students and the communities that we serve. It makes no sense if we put out publications and media where the lived experiences of our students and their faces and the faces of our faculty and staff don't look like the communities that we serve, that we don't speak the languages that we speak, and more importantly, we don't honor the cultural heritages that come with that. 7, spaces. How do we look at inclusive space, such as bathrooms, nursing stations, wellness centers, meditation, a challenge parking privilege? If you know a college campus, we have parking privilege, and it is something that we have to challenge each and every day. Looking at diverse arts and workstations that promote inclusion. These are things that colleges have to do, not just simply because it is something that makes us a better college, but because it's the right thing to do. And then finally, looking at partnerships and coalitions. We are restructuring MOUs with our partners because I'm beyond the fact, and I, similar to you, travel in a lot of spaces and places in the county. And oftentimes people say, oh, we're a partner with the college. We're a partner with the college. And we have so many partners, but we don't have any outcomes. So as a result of that, we are restructuring our MOUs, we're structuring this, and we're moving to a new model of alliances. So there's a mutuality to our coexistence, that we're going to be deliberate about defining outcomes, but more importantly, assessing those outcomes, and then reframing our relationship. So my buying a dinner at your chicken dinner and you buying a table at my chicken dinner is not a definition of partnership, that we're advancing our community deliberately. I'll end on telling you that, oh, thank you for that. So I'll end on, when we think about the educational ecosystem, I have a wonderful friend of mine whose wife is a cardiac nurse. And a few of you heard me tell this story, but I think it's particularly poignant right now. He'd been at work, and he decided to run up 4 or 5 flights of stairs, and he got to the top. And like a few of us, he was a little winded. And he went home, and he told his wife, he said, "Wife, I think I got a heart problem." And he kind of paused, and she looked at him. He said, "A heart problem?" He said, "Yes, I ran up 4 or 5 flights of stairs. I got to the top. I was winded." He said, "I just didn't feel good about that. I was an athlete, so I got to lose weight." So he was coming up with this complicated plan, but he said, "I got to see a cardiologist." And she kind of paused, and this is a real story. She said, "Baby, do you know that cardiac health is not measured in the moment of stress? Cardiac health is measured in the recovery afterwards." And he kind of paused, and she looked at him. She said, "So you're supposed to, when the body experiences stress, such as running up 4 or 5 flights of stairs, you're supposed to be somewhat winded. You might have a little glisten to your face when you get done with that. But the key is that you're not supposed to still be doing that 10 minutes later. You're still not supposed to be having profuse sweats and your heart hurting. That would be a sign of cardiac health." I think Montgomery County is in the moment right now of deciding that cardiac health, our wellness as a community, and this type of conversations that we're having is a measure of how we decide our wellness right now. So there's going to be a lot of stress as we start having bold, audacious conversations about racial equity. There's going to be some browbeating. There's going to be a little palpitation every once in a while. But I know for a fact that we have the courage and ability to do this work. I know that because of the community that we choose to live in. So it's going to be a little rocky for a while. But I think we're courageous. I know that we are. And I know for a fact that I choose to live here. I choose to live in Montgomery County because of that. So thank you for letting me be here today.
Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge that we have Kathleen Connor as well as Joseph Eong from Congressman Jamie Raskin's office. I also want to recognize Ms. Karen Brito, who is a former delegate, and she's also a mentor to me and to many people. Cherie Branson, who is a former member of this council as well as director of the Department of Procurement, is also here. And of course, so many of you who are very important to all of us. So now we'll continue our conversation. We're going to talk about community development and social services, that focus, and we'll start with Elijah Wheeler, Deputy Director and Social Justice Director from Montgomery County Collaboration Council.
Morning, Council President Navarro, members of County Council. Thanks for having me here this morning. I tell you, it's the worst thing to do is to have to follow Dr. Pollard at any event, and I've pulled that ticket a couple of times. Oh, boy. Yeah, please do. If we could change the order of things next time, I'd really appreciate it. She's such a dynamic and engaging and strong and important leader for the community of Montgomery County, and I'm always very, very impressed, not only by her words, but by her work at Montgomery College. And I think that that's the challenge that we have before us here, is the work. It's time to get past conversation into the work, into the action. The Collaboration Council, we have the privilege of working alongside county agency partners, community partners, to really start looking at systems and institutional change and pushing those levers where we can see some of those changes take place by identifying priority areas for children, youth, and family here in Montgomery County. When we start talking about equity, the definition of which is a set of fair and impartial practices. Montgomery County is known for being extremely diverse. However, we really need to start questioning whether or not diversity equals inclusion. Those are two vastly different things, right? Who actually sits in positions of decision-making power? I do have to tell you, while I greatly appreciate all members of County Council, it speaks volumes to me that there is only one woman on County Council. And not that you all did not earn your positions here, you did, rightfully so. But we have to start really examining these things, because if we don't examine our own roles and systems of oppression, then we can't actually do anything about it to change it, right? 400 years ago, the first Africans were brought here as slaves and were dropped on the shores of Virginia. But black people have only been free in this country, technically speaking, for 55 years, with the passing of the 1965 Civil Rights Act. And a lot of people would still testify to you today that we aren't free, technically speaking. We've got a long way to go. We're dealing with a bunch of people here who have experienced an accumulated disadvantage. And yet the expectation is that they perform at or have access to things that essentially have been kept from them for a number of years. When we look at our children in Montgomery County, there have been a lot of studies on grit and resilience and the importance of such in order to be successful. I would testify for you today that in order to thrive, let alone survive as a person of color in this country, you already have grit and resilience. That's something that's already built in. If we start looking at grit and resilience without really examining institutional barriers and walls that are put up for people, then we'll really never solve anything. Part of this also takes us understanding that our liberation is tied into the liberation of others. As a black person, I cannot actively advocate for my liberation without thinking about the liberation of my brown brothers and sisters who are fighting at the border right now. As a cisgender male, I cannot talk about my liberation if I don't talk about, thank you, the liberation of my brothers and sisters who identify as LGBTQ. And as a male, I can't talk about my liberation, whatever that may be as a male, if I'm not thinking about the liberation of women and the gaps that they have, not only in pay, but if we look at studies primarily for black women, regardless of socioeconomic status, who have the highest rates of infant mortality and morbidity, that's a problem. So I think the challenge that I said earlier that we have before us is really willing to do a deep dive into this work and really start to challenge ourselves and to really look at how systems have operated for a long period of time to keep people at a disadvantage and start to turn these levers and turn these systems upside down. The last thing that I will leave with you is that when we talk about slavery, which we always happen to come back to during Black History Month, I did not hear Sojourner Truth, I did not hear Frederick Douglass ever talk about the reform of slavery. They talked about the abolition of slavery. We have to start looking at the abolition of certain systems in order to change things. It's okay to talk about reform in some cases, but some things need to totally be uprooted and changed entirely in order to get to the outcomes we want to get to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do need to also acknowledge Mr. Terrell North, who is the new Executive Director of the Collaboration Council, and welcome and congratulations. Thank you so much. Carolyn Lowry from the Wheaton Network Builder Program for Impact Service Wing.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. One correction, my name is Carolyn Lowry, and my title has changed to Senior Network Builder, focusing on racial equity, which is why I'm here today.
Wonderful. We'll update that.
Thank you. I am a native Silver Springer, and I'm very proud of it, very, very proud of it. And I work at Impact, and I have for 3 years. We are an organization that really works to strengthen the fabric of the communities. And in addition, we are part of the community, so what we are working towards is something that we are very much entrenched in because it is part of us. We do this by engaging communities in many, many different ways. We do this through conversations, actions, affordable sports programs, learning opportunities, films, parents groups, etc. We have learned, this is our 20th anniversary, and we're very happy for that. So we have learned that network building and working to maintain the fabric of society and communities is difficult because of a lot of the racial equity issues that have already been mentioned. I had jotted notes, and following Dr. Pollard, Shepard Evans, C. Marie, Elijah, it's very hard to be as eloquent, but also I wanted to focus on some of the things that they mentioned. The work that we're doing towards racial equity and impact and in the county it's difficult. It's really hard. We have to have the audacity to know that we have to be perseverant, we need to be resilient, and we have to do this with intention. What we do at Impact really focuses on cultural change and cultural shifts, and we do this because we have understood and we have learned and we have discussed and we have sat in so many meetings and conversations internally about why why this is so important. And excuse me, I get choked up occasionally because this is so personal. We realize that we really have to do this work because this is the core of the society, of community of the United States, and it has to change. We want everyone in the community to thrive. That's part of our mission. And we take that seriously. And when we think about why people aren't thriving and things that people in our community have told us, many of it goes back to racial equity, at the individual level, at the systems level, organizational level. We have a few activities that I'd like to highlight. I'm sorry, again, I have notes jotted down all over the place. We have the Network Weaver Learning Lab that's coming up that we're partnering with Leadership Montgomery on. And that is an 8-month program to really dig deeply into some of the cultural changes that need to happen and personal changes that need to happen to allow for us to dismantle racism. We have film and discussion series every month that focus on different ethnic and cultural and racial communities, and we do this to build perspective and awareness to other communities. We also have affinity groups that we are piloting right now, and they are groups that we are hoping that will, one, work to build the social cohesion in the community between people of color, also to hold accountable the county to different recommendations that were provided in the OLO report. We do this so that we can learn from each other and we can have a space where we can talk, we can gather, we can learn and discuss internally. From here, I have a lot of words that just I've written down. Perseverance, culture change. These are the things that I really want to stress because we have a long, long haul. And it's not going to be easy. And as Dr. Pollard said, it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be some moments of probably needing to understand more and listen more. And this is what we need to do. This is what we focus on. I think I will end here. If I go on, I will go on for another 25 minutes about why this is important to me. I'm happy to work with all of the people in our staff and many of the people on this panel to create a healthier and a thriving Montgomery County.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So when we were having discussions with staff and also with the Council Communications Office about putting together this panel and this program, I felt that it was just critical that we would include the voices of our young people. And I say that for many reasons. I mean, we are very fortunate in Montgomery County to really work really hard to build opportunities for everybody, especially when it comes to education and the investment that we make, and we strive so hard and work so hard. But the truth of the matter is that we have to acknowledge that just creating those opportunities doesn't mean that the access is there. And I think particularly one thing that I always remember is sitting here during the recession, having conversations about how we were going to move Montgomery County forward, and listening one day to the radio, there were economists talking about the global recession, and they were talking about how of all the developed countries in the world affected by this global recession, all of them had an aging population, all of them. And the United States was the only one that had an aging population, but a young population also. And in that sense, they were saying that we were very fortunate. But now when you look at the demographic makeup of that younger population that's coming up, right, who is going to be the workforce, who is going to take us to the next level, who's going to keep us competitive, the vast majority are children of color, are youth of color. And so that right there just shook me to the core in terms of this is a real sense of urgency, and it should be a bipartisan issue. This should concern all of us, that if we don't do everything possible where there is to dismantle certain structures, whatever it takes, to make sure that all our youth are doing the best they can, then we're literally accepting the reality that we may have to import our workforce from China or India because we have failed. Our own children, our own youth, our own economic viability, our own national security. And so for me, this is such a pivotal moment in terms of how, after so many discussions, what are we really doing to make sure that all of our extraordinarily capable youth of color have not only the access to those opportunities, but can be there making sure that they can achieve everything possible. I live and breathe this with my two extraordinary Afro-Latina young women, one of which is going on an interview today for a job. But I live and breathe this every day, and I am convinced that this is how we're going to be able to continue to enjoy an amazing Montgomery County, but also an amazing nation. So I want to honor and thank both of you for being here today and willing to share your perspectives. And we'll start with Mr. Nathan Bite, student of Montgomery County Public Schools, and I hear he's also running for a student member of the board, by the way. So please take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, council members. I wanted to start off by saying that this panel is empowering, and this is exactly where it starts, because when I got engaged in student leadership and building the community in Sligo and Silver Spring, I realized that most of the people which made the decisions and were up there and consistently on my phone or on TV neither looked like me or had been through the inequities that my friends and I have been through. And that's what was exactly disheartening about how we empower African Americans and our young folks in our schools. And so what we've done in student leadership, and thankfully I can say that now since you've mentioned student member of the board, over half of the candidates are candidates of color, are from the down county, from schools which are predominantly African American and free reduced meals. And that says something about where our county is going. And while we've came a long way and build upon what our ancestors and many civil rights leaders have built up for us, we recognize that change comes from the bottom up and not the top down. And exactly how students will be in the seats that you guys are today. And that's exactly why we need to recognize that inclusion and diversity is what's going to make sure that our most underrepresented group in our county is what's succeeding and thriving. And so in student leadership in Montgomery County, we have the regional student government, and we have the Minority Scholars Program. We have ACES, which continues to empower young students in our high schools. And we have these programs which are continuing to build and grow. And I can say that in middle school and years ago, it wasn't exactly what this is right now. And seeing what our county council is right now, seeing what our Board of Education is a light in the right direction. And what we've done in the countywide student government is we stepped up to the plate knowing that we have problems, and building off of Martin Luther King and Reverend William Barber's movement of socioeconomic inequality to address de jure and socioeconomic segregation, to address how African Americans are disproportionately affected by college prep readiness and the programs such as career pathways that are ahead. But thankfully, Dr. Pollard and Mrs. Evans give us the light in the right direction, and many of you guys here, as to what we need to do. And one thing that I also wanted to mention is during the summer, I've gotten to meet Reverend William Barber and the work that he's been doing. I've never met him before that, or have really got to see the stuff that he does. But now that I know and see what true movement and inclusion and the fight can really take and look like, shows me that, in Tennessee or in North Carolina, we can address the inequalities that are affecting our Black and Hispanic populations, the LGBTQ and special ed community. But we have to do it together. And we have to recognize that change, once again, only comes when we are hand in hand together. That when we have students which are coming to the board hearings, that are seeing people that look like them, this stuff can actually be talked about. They can be headlined, and it's the programs that we build in our schools. It's the elementary schoolers that we talk to that will make up the communities. And just as you said, the young people will win. But it takes you guys to look at us and include more students in these panels. And the board to expand upon our programs to our younger elementary and middle schoolers as to how we reach out to them. And it also takes the conversation of not just talking about what is politically or, popular in your communities, but to step up to the plate and discuss the institutional problems that are happening in our county. And when we do that with people that look like us and everybody else that is willing to step up to the plate, regardless if it's popular or not, change can happen. But it takes the leadership of you all and everybody in this room, and hopefully what the future will look like, to build upon our younger brothers and sisters. So I just wanted to thank you all for allowing me to talk to you guys before today. I hope that in the future, more young students, African Americans, can step up to the plate and build upon what we have started. Just as you mentioned, 55 years ago was when we got it started. But we have dozens of more years as to how we can build and create a greater environment instead of what we've been through. So once again, thank you all for this opportunity to talk before you all today. I'm hopeful about what the future will look like in Montgomery County and how we can set the example for our neighbors in other states and hopefully this nation. Thank you.
Great, so Ms. Ward Williamson, who's a student at Montgomery College.
Thank you, President Navarro and the council, for having me here again today. I am the Student Senate Vice President at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Montgomery College campus. And I'm speaking from my perspective as a non-traditional student, the oldest of 5 children. So Nate has my heart like pumping down there. I have 3 young brothers, so I'm just like, ooh, wait till they get to this point in life. So for me, when I thought about what I was going to say today, I just really wanted to focus more on what equity and inclusion mean to me. And that means that I feel represented, I feel welcomed, and I feel valued. And when I say that, that starts with early education for me, so pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. And growing up, I didn't really have many teachers that looked like me. My youngest brother is experiencing that now, where he just feels misunderstood in his elementary school. And certain things that happen outside of school, if your teacher can't really relate or understand, it's very hard to deal with students that are, they may be acting out behavioral-wise, but it's due to other circumstances going on in their life. So I really think that as far as education is concerned, we should have more teachers, faculty, staff, principals that look like our students, that talk like our students, that go through some of the same experiences our students go through. I also would like to say that thinking about how we explain or experience different holidays with our students, just because they're not a day off from school, doesn't mean that we can't add that to our curriculum and teach our students about different holidays and why certain cultures celebrate them. For example, Vietnamese New Year's, Ramadan, Rosh Hashanah, Dia de los Muertos. So I think having those conversations with our young people encourages them outside of the classroom to ask questions to their classmates. Why do you do this? Or what do you guys eat on this holiday? Just having that conversation at an early age makes it far more comfortable when you get to my age in rooms like this, where we have to have something very uncomfortable to talk about. On our campus, the Student Senate has a committee called the Multicultural and Diversity Committee. And last year and this year, they put on a multicultural fair where 20 to 24 different tables are set up in our atrium, and students can make a poster advertising their country, nation, or culture. They can dress in their traditional garb. They can play music at their table. The Student Life and Student Senate sponsor the food, so we reach out to local restaurants to provide food from all over the world. But the key to getting the food is you have to have a passport, which is given during registration, and you must get 10 stamps from different cultures to prove that you've actually learned something before you get a chance to eat. Students, we love the free food, but you have to work for it. And I also think something like this is a great way for the community to not only talk about something uncomfortable, but to kind of drag them into the political conversation where it doesn't feel like we're only talking about voting or lobbying, but you guys are still in the conversation. You've asked us, especially as students, to come, and honestly, it's really hard to get students involved in politics right now. There's kind of like a distaste for it. So things like this, and I know you guys are having multiple conversations at our civic building downtown where it's open to the community. So I'm hoping things like that will encourage students to come out and speak their experiences as well. I also want to say that language is important. So how we talk to people, how we talk around people, being cautious of what was said to them previously by other people is very important. So we've talked about having microaggression trainings because it's not the big things that really stick with a person on a day-to-day basis. It's the small things that can really change a relationship between a boss and an employee, or a professor and a student. So that's something really important we've talked about in the Senate. And just me being an older student and really listening to some of the students on campus, their feelings, thoughts. It's important to have an open mind and listening ears, because yes, you may have the power to implement the change, but if you don't hear me the right way, you may not do what's best for me. And I heard someone on the panel speak to that a little bit earlier. I would also like to say that institutions may have training, policies, and initiatives in place, but if you're not practicing them, then the people on the ground level do not feel that they're important. They're just something on paper and for show. So it's really important that we have a cohesive movement as far as our policies and the actions that we take. Once again, thank you for having me. It was so wonderful to hear everyone speak on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists for spending some time with us today. This is so powerful and inspiring. We do have some lights, and I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President Navarro. I really want to compliment you and your staff on organizing today's discussion. This is really powerful, incredibly powerful. I wish we could continue this conversation and do this every week, frankly. I think it would keep us so grounded. I wanted to just make a very few observations. I know that everyone will have something to say on the question of what we can do. The comments about, we know we need to do more with housing. We know we need to do more with transportation. All of these policy areas fit together. One theme I've heard a lot about is pre-K and early education. I think that is an intervention that really goes to the heart of inequities and history and the future. And I think there's so much consensus at this council and this county and among the community leaders of this county that we can do more, and we can move faster, and we can achieve more. So I want to just thank everyone who's referenced that and acknowledge that I think that is one key area for us to work together on this agenda. But to the comments from Nate, it struck a chord with me. When I speak with young people, I say often what I'm saying to myself these days, which is that we live in a time of a lot of conflict that is open around racial justice. And that is a good thing, in my opinion. It's unfortunate that we have a president who is so transparently racist. But our history of having a consensus in this country that did not address racial equity issues and was silent on those issues, and therefore didn't have that conflict, that's not better. What's better is being uncomfortable, as the word was used, and actually engaging in that discussion and acknowledging our history. And the fact that our political parties seem to be accelerating this transformation to one party that is almost avowedly openly racist and pursuing a racist agenda, and another party that is inclusive and seeking to be inclusive, I should say, that makes me actually feel optimistic for the first time in a long time that maybe we'll get something done, because I think the numbers are on our side. And so as tough as it is to live day to day in this environment, and I think it's tough. At the same time, I really feel that maybe there's a better day ahead because we're now starting to embrace the real work that we've talked about, but maybe didn't take on as directly as we should. So even though there's conflict, I think it takes conflict to make progress. You're never making progress if you're not disagreeing and you're not engaged in a tussle. You know, you're not doing anything if you're not fighting about it, in my opinion. The other thing I wanted to say to Elisha Wheeler's comment about it's only been 55 years since the passage of the Civil Rights Act. That is so important. You know, after slavery was ended, it was the effect of it was perpetuated through official government policies at the federal, state, and local level for generations, for 100 years. And we see that in the Washington region, the consequences of suburban development that was whites-only development, fostering concentration of poverty for black people. And then you have immigrant communities arriving, and the only place they can afford to purchase housing is in communities that have been segregated and where poverty has been perpetuated. And the government has so actively perpetuated white wealth and black poverty and poverty for people of color through so many ways, through education, through housing, through transportation, through all of these different policies. But it's only, you know, we're dealing with that legacy every day now. Every day. And so it's not just about slavery as much as that issue is so important to us. It's also about segregation, which is a modern phenomenon. And it is still here today. So that's something I just think we need to keep in mind as we understand why this is so important. But thank you for all of your work. Really appreciate everything you've said today and look forward to continuing this work together.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I'm going to try and be brief, but I was inspired by the conversation that we need to get uncomfortable. So let me remind people of where we are right now and what's happened in this past week. In this past week, we've had a person that says that the KKK needs to ride again in response to what is happening with some state legislators in a state who are trying to move forward the very things that we talk about we need to do in terms of progress. Just yesterday, a delegate in the Maryland General Assembly was quoted as using the N-word in describing a district that she door-knocked on in Prince George's County. These things are happening now. Flyers are being disseminated throughout the state of Maryland as well as around the United States, continuing to say that white supremacy needs to be the rule of the land. This is where we are now. Black history tells us about the stories about what happened when those things were allowed to exist in our communities and what it meant and the suffering that it meant for black people in the United States of America. I encourage people, because this is Black History Month, to find out their own history. I actually went to one of the DNA sites and sent in my DNA and found out a lot about my family that I didn't know. My grandfather, I always wondered, I knew that my grandfather had married twice, and I'd always thought to myself, well, you know, what had happened with that was, you know, divorce wasn't big back then, and found out that his first wife had died in childbirth. And he was then brought into another family. And I said, well, I don't understand. Why is he living with this family, the Mott family, in South Carolina? And found out through doing some more research through this website that my grandfather's parents were actually burned alive by the Ku Klux Klan. These stories aren't that far from us when you talk about those 55 years of history. And the key is that because they're not that far from us, they can come back if we aren't intentional about saying this is not us. We only have to look at what happened just down south, a few states, where a person took their car and rammed it through people who were saying that we want people to be seen as equal, killing and maiming people for the sake of the preservation of elitism. That's happening now. And if we aren't vocal about what we need to do and that we are not accepting of this at every single realm, this isn't just about us saying, well, it's not okay to do these kinds of things. We need to be intentional and forthright about saying that these are not accepted in our community. We need to be strong in our voice and united that this is not us. Because I fear that if we're not strong in terms of saying those things and making sure that people understand that these are not accepted, we will easily slip back into this dark past that we saw. We are not that far away, folks. We are not that far away. And so I just encourage folks, again, to talk to your families, learn about your history, but more importantly, crusade for a better place. Because I can tell you that every time I read stories like this that continue to happen in 2019, we can talk about 55 years ago and what happened with the Civil Rights Act and all of those kinds of things. But if it hasn't changed what's happening in terms of people still being murdered and people still being marginalized and discriminated against today, we haven't gone anywhere.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Albornoz.
So my heart is pumping this morning, and it's not just because of the third cup of coffee that I just finished drinking. Dr. Martin Luther King discussed the fierce urgency of now. And I have been remarkably invigorated and inspired by our panel this morning. There were so many quotes that came out of our conversation that are going to resonate with me. Planning for them, not with them. Working now, needing to get the job done now. So many partners, not enough outcomes. Cardiac health. Diversity is different than inclusion. So many powerful messages that we need to take forward. As the former director of the Recreation Department, I had the honor and privilege of partnering with a lot of people in this room and with the leadership of our former council and the leadership of our former county executive renovate our 4 community recreation centers in historically black neighborhoods. And I learned of a history that was not taught in our schools. I learned of a history right in my backyard that I was not aware of, did not appreciate. And it opened my eyes to so much of the rich tradition that we have here in Montgomery County. And looking at the speakers who were in that video and seeing the leaders in this room is a story that needs to be told to our students, is a story that needs to be incorporated into the curriculum of our schools, is a story that needs to be incorporated in formal ways in the way of developing projects and assignments to encourage our students to go beyond their own zip codes and beyond their own schools to visit the entire county. And so I encourage my partners and friends in MCPS and also all of our schools to create projects and to ensure a time and space and encourage our students and families to become aware of that rich history and tradition and to take a better advantage of it. I am so proud to be serving with colleagues who understand the importance of this work and was inspired by the racial equity training that we all participated in. And that is also a history of our country that is not taught in our schools, but needs to be something that we concentrate on a lot more of. And we need to ensure that our diverse sectors, our private sector, and our nonprofit sectors are part of this conversation as well. And so I look forward very much and I'm honored to be serving with all of you. I know we need more women on this council moving forward, and I know that there are steps that are going to be taken in the near future to ensure that. But I am inspired by the conversation this morning, and I'm ready to get to work. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you all for speaking with us, and thank you all for joining us. I know everybody in this room has had a role to play throughout our lives and currently as well to make our community as strong as it can be. And Councilmember Albornoz referenced the racial equity workshop that in this short 3 months that we have constituted this council, we've spent 3 days talking about this. And I want to thank Council President Navarro for helping lead that effort. It's been enlightening to see what we know is true as opposed to what we thought was true. And that informs us to where we need to go. And we do have a lot of work to do, as has been noted here. This change isn't going to be easy. It's going to be hard, lots of tough conversations, and those conversations will take grit, they'll take intentionality, and they'll take honest conversations, which is the recurring theme that we've been hearing today. And I know all of us on the council, and again, all of you have been doing a lot of this work in many different ways, but what we need to do now is come together and really get down to it. It's a matter of doing what's right, and the decades and centuries of injustice that have occurred bring us to this moment where we, or I'll say I, need you all to hold our feet to the fire and make sure that we don't just keep talking about this. We want to do it, and we need you to help us do it because of the nature of these conversations. And so I'm confident that working together, we will continue bending that arc towards justice. It's what we need to keep doing, and I look forward to working with all of you, with all of my colleagues, to make sure that we get this done. So thank you all.
Thank you. Councilmember Hochberg.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to all the panelists and to everybody that's joined us today. I always really look forward to today and to the great presentations that we have every year. And in the short time I've been on the council, I think today we heard more presentations about the future and not only about the past, which is really exciting and invigorating. And I want to echo what many of my colleagues have said about, I think the need to and the commitment we all have to rededicate ourselves to the work of racial equity that Black History Month really needs to be about, rather than just celebrating the past. Having said that, I really wanted to spend my time giving an overdue and heartfelt thanks to the members of the African American Heritage Markers Committee, and they're here, and if they want to stand, they could stand, but I really want, the Council President mentioned them, but Tina Clark, Charlotte Cofield, Pat Tyson, and Warren Fleming. Come on, you all. And Anita Powell, who couldn't be with us today. She's hard at work, I'm sure. They have done tremendous work over the last 2 years now, and put in an incredible amount of time to get these markers that you heard about literally off the ground and in the ground later this year. And I'm really grateful to them for their work, and to my colleagues for supporting this, and to Sonia and her staff for making such a great video. This project had been in my mind for years, and at the point at which I talked to Tina about the history that had already been done and the research that had already been done by her and Anita and others for years, and found out that all this great work had been done, and as she said at the time, was just sort of sitting in a drawer at the end of the Duncan administration. it was great to hear that later Councilmember Branson, who's here, and Leventhal worked with the planning staff to get it up on the planning website. And that's certainly terrific too, so that those accomplishments could be remembered. But I knew a lot more people would see the rich history of our county and be able to celebrate the unacknowledged accomplishments of so many hundreds and thousands of individuals who struggled and succeeded against great odds in, as you said, Gabe, in areas that we walk through every single day, and that by putting markers in the ground, we'd put this history in front of people, not who were assigned to do a school project and looked on the planning website, and not people who are voluntary historians who chose to look this up, but the people who really need to hear this history and learn this history. People just walking down the street in Montgomery County with their families, or driving down the street, and that need to learn what has happened right in the areas that we live in every day by the people who helped to build the county that we all enjoy. So I'm really grateful to the whole committee and to the planning staff. Gwen Wright was here, Rebecca Ballo, who's put in an enormous amount of time putting this together, and my own staff, Andrea Nunez and Julio Cerrone, who've been working with them to get us to a point where in a short amount of time, we're all going to get to go to an unveiling of these sites and really be part of telling this history to a much, much broader audience. So thank you all again for challenging us today, for making us rededicate ourselves, and I look forward to seeing you all throughout the year, continuing to talk about the great work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Council President, and thank you for having this day today. This is a wonderful tradition that Montgomery County has had. I want to thank the panel, each one of you. You know, everybody said they didn't want to speak before the speaker that just spoke before. I wouldn't want to speak after any of you. You all did a great job, and we sincerely appreciate it. I want to thank the people who are in the video, and there's many people in this room who have done videos before or certainly could have been in that video. And I tell you, a day like today brings back a lot of memories for me. Craig talked about his family, but of course, I'm from Montgomery County. I was born here. My grandparents opened up a store in Gaithersburg 100 years ago, or 101 years ago now, I guess, in that building. But, you know, it's hard to believe, and I talked about this earlier this morning at the breakfast, but it's hard to believe that during my lifetime, schools were integrated in Montgomery County. And I know there's people in this room who are shaking their heads just like I am, but schools were integrated in Montgomery County during my lifetime. In 1955, 56, I guess, I was in kindergarten, and schools had integrated in Montgomery County in 1955. Recently, I thought that was the first year we integrated. I've since read that they actually integrated. Some students came to the Down County area, not a lot of students, but some students came to the Down County area, and then 1 year later, they came to the Up County. I have to double check that that's correct, but one of the things that was so dramatic to me, Gaithersburg was a very small place. It was a small town. Everybody knew everybody. You talk about some of you, Sheber, you were talking about that, you know, a village raises a family. I always say that when you threw a rock, somebody had already called your parents by the time it landed. I mean, that's the way it worked. And it was a great thing, and everybody made certain you did the right thing. But you would go to school with people, and you went to, you know, you were in clubs together and whatnot, but you couldn't go to the movies together. People who were African American in Gaithersburg, I see heads shaking, the African American students had to go up, the people had to go upstairs. The white students, the white people, sat downstairs. You were not allowed to socialize in that setting. We socialized in other ways, but not in that setting. And that's during my lifetime. It's hard to believe in Montgomery County, Maryland, that we did this, but we did it. And we've done it so that people, I have lifetime friends who we still get together. I've had lifetime friends who have helped me get to the positions that I'm in, and I've helped them to be successful in their right. We did it because we knew that it was the right thing to do. Montgomery County is of the top 10 most diverse cities in America. Most diverse communities, not all the cities, most diverse communities in America. Of the top 10, Montgomery County has 4 of them. Gaithersburg, which is number 2. Now, just as an aside, when I was mayor, we were number 1. But Gaithersburg, which is number 2, Germantown, Silver Spring, and Rockville. We are in the top 10 of the most diverse places in America. And when you see the pride that we have by having a community that works together, is it always perfect? Of course not. It's not always perfect inside anybody's own family. But we have the discussions together. We know that we're going to have a difficult discussion, but we sit together as a family, and our community is a family. We sit together as a family and solve our problems. And if we can't solve it this way, we're going to have a little bit more discussion to solve it another way. And that's what it takes. I am proud to serve with the people from the Board of Education and the people in the community and all of my colleagues because I can tell you, not only are we going to have the difficult discussions, we're going to have the discussions that were not as difficult. We're going to get to a better place because we've gotten to a better place now. We're far from where we need to be, but we've gotten to a better place, and we're going to continue to do that, and it's because of all of us working together. I sincerely thank you for all your work.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to you and your staff for an absolutely terrific presentation here. And thank you to the panelists and to those who appeared in the video, and many of you in the audience who truly are the foot soldiers for this absolutely critical and important work. Lots of what I was going to say has already been said by people who have said it better than I would have, so I will try to be brief. Councilmember Katz mentioned a lot of changes that have happened in his lifetime, and my lifetime is not quite as experienced as his is. But listening to Nate speak earlier, I can tell you that a lot has changed in Montgomery County, even in my lifetime, from when I was a student leader, a student body president at Montgomery County Public Schools, and having a student member of the board election where most of the candidates are students of color is a dramatic change from even when I was in high school, which I'm reminded by my colleagues wasn't that long ago. So it is important that it's not just the 55-year history, but it's the recent history that we are making progress every day, and largely making that progress because of the people who have spoken here today, who are in this room, and those who aren't in this room and weren't in the video, who have really just dedicated themselves to this work to ensure that we are adding seats to the table. I was talking earlier with two of my many District 1 bosses, the Ricks, and I grew up with, no matter how big the table, there's always room for one more. But if you don't have a seat at the table, you end up on the menu. And for too long, those who haven't had a seat at the table have ended up on the menu in more ways than one. And that really is the work before us of ensuring that we allow as many people at the table who are here, and those who are here are demanding that seat at the table, which is important, and that we are listening. We can't speak for people unless we're speaking with people, which is something that I very much appreciated, Dr. Pollard, and I think that's something that we have to take to heart. But I also think that we need to ensure that we're allowing people to be able to speak for themselves. And I think that really is the long-term goal before us, and the work that must continue. The path towards progress isn't linear. These are the uncomfortable and challenging conversations that are the most important conversations that we can have. And so I am humbled, I'm inspired, I'm excited to be on this journey with each of you, and I'm reinvigorated to take this path together, understanding that it's going to be uncomfortable, understanding that it's going to be difficult, and understanding that we have to make sure that table gets larger and larger and has more and more chairs, and that we bring them with us as we move forward. So thank you very much to each of you, and for allowing me to take part in a really special morning.
Well, so this really has been, I think, a very important conversation. I'm always reminded that, those of us that sit over here, as well as members of the Board of Education, we're always so busy during our committee work and our council session work and policy work, et cetera, and sometimes it's difficult to pause and really take the time as a body to engage in really in-depth and robust conversations about where we are and reflect on where we need to go. So I hope that this year, as president, I'll have the opportunity to lead more of these types of conversations, because it is really important to have everybody in the room like this and for us to take the time to do this. And I want to say that, it's so inspiring to know that there are going to be conversations that will lead to certain outcomes. Some are small in nature, some are going to be very big in nature. I do want to commend President of the Board, Shebra Evans. Last night they did adopt a resolution to take a look at school names and make sure that the school names actually reflect positive history of inclusion and tolerance in our county. And, This was something that was initiated by a particular community, and I, sent a letter to board president, and they quickly acted. And so that's what I think, that's how power and really quick response to community needs, not necessarily waiting for leaders to do it, but when the community steps up, this is what it's all about. And so I do commend that. And that may be in some people's minds a small step, but it's really huge, because we live at a time where it's so easy to just Google the name of a particular school. And when we have the kind of, student body that we have, I think that we need to make sure that those names do reflect those kinds of inspirational figures. But there will be there'll be other very important decisions that we have to make vis-a-vis, legislation or budgetary decisions that have to be made that really will have the long impact. And so I welcome everybody's participation in all of this. And just saw Jane Park over there from Impact Silver Spring. Thank you for being here as well, because everybody here does great work. So now we're going to, I'm going to invite my colleagues. We're going to line up. We do have some awards that we're going to hand to our participants, and then we're going to take the very important photo. And then we'll pause for about 5 minutes before we get into the rest of our agenda. So if everybody can join us. So we do have some nifty awards. We're going to start with Miss Tina Clark. Very well, and this is for you. Thank you so much for being here. Charlotte Caulfield. Ms. Shebra Evans. Mr. Warren Fleming. Carolyn Lowry. Thank you. Thank you for participating this morning. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Dr. Pollard. Dr. P. I'm sure you can find a tiny little space to put this, work, because I know she has so many of them. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I think that Miss Anita Powell here, I didn't see her. Well, we'll keep her award and send it to her. Mr. James Stowe. Is he here? Here it is. There it is. Thank you so much for everything that you do. All right, Ms. C. Marie Taylor. Making great things happen and forming leaders here in the county. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you.
I don't want to stab you or anything like that. Nate Timbite. Thank you so much for participating today, Nate. Appreciate it. And good luck. All right, Patricia Tyson. Patricia Tyson here. There she comes. Come on down, Miss Pat Tyson. Thank you so much. Elijah Wheeler. Appreciate you taking the time. All right, and last but not least, Rashani Ward Williamson. Thank you so much for. And I love your outfit. All right, now we're going to take the photo. So can somebody just take this microphone away so it's not in the way? Good afternoon, everybody. We need to get started again. We have a full agenda. Dear colleagues,
Start dragging them back.
dear colleagues, we need to get started. Oh, I like your gavel.
That's a mayor for you.
Been there.
It's the gavel pen.
Yeah, a gavel pen. That's why I love this pen.
It's pretty nice.
Levengers.
Next time.
Okay, everybody. We need to continue on with our agenda. So colleagues of mine that might be in the audience, if you can please come back to the dais before I start calling people out by name. Just kidding. It's a joke. Okay, we're going to continue with our agenda, and we're going to now move on to item number 6, which is an interview for County Executive Appointee of Assistant Administrative Officer. And we are going to interview Ms. Adriana Hochberg. Okay, good morning. All right, Mr. Klein, any opening remarks?
Yes, good morning, Madam President, members of the council. I'm Andrew Klein, Chief Administrative Officer, and I'm delighted to present for confirmation Adriana Hochberg for Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. And before I talk about Adriana, I just want to speak briefly about the role of ACAOs in this administration because it will be different than in past administrations. The county executive has outlined 7 priority outcomes: thriving youth and families, a growing economy, a more affordable and welcoming county, easier commutes, a greener county, safe neighborhoods, and efficient, sustainable government. Each of the ACAOs who you will interview today and Thursday will be the leads on 2 of those priority outcomes. Adriana will be the lead on a greener county and easier commutes. And I think you'll find that she's ideally suited for that role, as well as to be our point person on the climate action plan and coordinating the work toward zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035. As Chief of Staff for the DC Department of Energy and Environment, she's played a role in developing the district's sustainability and zero waste plans. And she also knows how local government works from a management perspective: budgeting, communications, performance accountability. She has experience in the district as well as federal experience. So very pleased to present her to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I also want to just express my appreciation to my colleagues. We did make some changes to the agenda so that we could facilitate the interviews and make sure that we're able to be on the right track, because we want our county executive to have the positions in place in order to get going with all this very important work. And it's really great to know for us to start identifying the leads on these particular issues. So we really do appreciate the methodical work that has taken place to get us to this point. Really appreciate that.
Greatly appreciate your flexibility in doing that.
Absolutely. Okay, so Ms. Hochberg, now I am pronouncing it correctly. I do have a few questions that are very standard, and then we'll open it up to my colleagues for particular follow-up questions. So just tell us specifically about what in your background and qualifications make you an ideal candidate for the role of Assistant CAO in our county, specifically as it relates to your policy areas that were just described.
Good morning, Madam President and council members. My name is Adriana Yamamoto Hochberg, and I'm honored to be nominated for the position of Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. As a prospective member of the dedicated team that County Executive Erich is assembling, I'm excited for the opportunity to serve the county that is my home. My experience as an environmental professional, local government manager, and traffic safety advocate have equipped me with the tools and approaches needed to make Montgomery County greener, cut our carbon emissions, and enhance transportation options for residents. The path to my public service career began in my childhood in Brazil. Although I was born in the US, I grew up in Porto Alegre, a sprawling city of 1.5 million people located in southern Brazil. I lived near the Guaíba River, which had magnificent sunsets, but was so polluted that no one could fish or swim in it safely. I was fortunate to live in a comfortable house and attend a private school that was open year-round, in contrast to my friends who went to public schools and sat at home for months at a time because their underpaid teachers were striking for fair pay. On my daily ride to school, I passed through favelas, or shanty towns, that starkly contrasted with my sense of what a city ought to look like and provide for its residents. I had a profound sense that what I was seeing around me was wrong and unjust, and as a 9-year-old, I created a list of all the city problems that I wanted to fix, from cleaning up the river to providing people with good schools and housing. It was then that I began to sense that my future would consist of addressing challenges facing communities. When I was 11 years old, my family immigrated to the United States, to a small town in West Virginia. I went through and eventually overcame the culture shock. I learned English and dedicated myself to my studies. And I think that two of my personal strengths, adaptability and persistence, stem from my experiences in learning to adjust to life in a different society. Throughout my studies and my professional life, I maintained a deep interest in making communities more livable, and this passion has guided my education. I earned a master's in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government, where I had the opportunity to explore a wide range of subjects from transportation policy to behavioral economics. And a highlight was learning about environmental policy and the science of climate change from Professors John Holdren and William Clark. Professor Holdren later went on to serve as President Obama's science advisor. Although I'm not a scientist, my work is informed by science and by facts. I spent the early years of my environmental career at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. There, I worked primarily to help Native American communities across the country install and upgrade wastewater treatment facilities on their reservations. I enjoyed the work, but I felt geographically disconnected from the communities that I was serving. I decided to make the switch to local government to have a more tangible connection to the work and to the people. I made the move from federal to local government just before the Great Recession of 2008. As a program analyst at the DC Office of the City Administrator, I worked with a portfolio of agencies to identify cost savings or ways to reduce agency budgets without impacting operations. Through this experience, I immersed myself in government budgeting and found creative ways to free up funds and pay for needed services. For instance, I noticed that some agencies were subsidizing employee parking while other agencies were not. By eliminating employee parking subsidies, I freed up approximately $200,000 in the general budget and provided an incentive to city employees for using mass transit and other commuting options, which benefits the environment. Since 2010, I've worked at the DC Department of Energy and Environment, and for the last 6 years in the role as Chief of Staff. The Department of Energy and Environment, or DOEE, is an agency of approximately 400 staff with programs spanning from energy benchmarking, sustainability, river and stream restoration, air quality enforcement, solar deployment, and many other programs. As Chief of Staff, I serve a dual role. As the second in command under the Director of DOEE, I provide daily oversight in handling budget, policy, program, and personnel issues impacting the agency. I also directly manage a team of 8 who handle a variety of responsibilities, from launching the DC Green Bank to providing community outreach. I have been an essential part of the leadership that has created a high-performing agency, and I have personally led and participated in a number of initiatives to make the city more livable. I was part of the team that developed the Sustainable DC Plan to make the district the greenest, healthiest, most livable city in the country by 2032. Specifically, I co-facilitated the Waste Working Group, which consisted of government staff and members of the public who together developed recommendations for attaining zero waste in the district by 2032. I was also involved in launching SolarWorks DC, a program that provides hands-on training to residents in solar installation and places solar systems on low-income households to reduce their electricity bills. To date, SolarWorks DC has graduated its 4th cohort of trainees and installed panels on nearly 100 homes. SolarWorks DC was recognized as one of the top 25 public innovations of 2018 by the Innovations in American Government Awards. Most recently, I led the development of the district's Volkswagen Settlement Spending Plan, which will invest $8.1 million to improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the city. I brought together an interdisciplinary team of air quality specialists, an electric vehicle expert, and an equity specialist to craft a spending plan that prioritizes cleaner transportation investments in the most vulnerable neighborhoods of Washington, D.C. To have a complete picture of who I am, I need to discuss my interest in manhole covers and sidewalks and how it led me to become a pedestrian safety advocate. Since 2010, I've been capturing images of interesting manhole covers and sidewalks for posting on my blog. I enjoy visiting new places and I love to walk. Taking pictures of manhole covers and sidewalks is my way of remembering the places that I've been. Over time, I paid attention to sidewalks and their infrastructure. As I paid attention to sidewalks and their infrastructure, I began realizing that some places are not very safe or accommodating for walking or biking for that matter. I began writing about ADA accessibility issues, the dangers of parking lots, and the dangers of walking on thin sidewalks next to speeding cars. In 2017, I completed the Walking College Fellowship from America Walks, which is a national nonprofit dedicated to making communities more walkable. As part of the Walking College, I developed and implemented a walking action plan for my neighborhood of Aspen Hill, informed by resident interviews, by data that I gathered at walk audits, and by a review of the previous road safety assessments completed by the county and state departments of transportation. I began making infrastructure improvement requests. Some of my requests have already been successfully implemented, such as doubling the crossing time at Connecticut Avenue from 22 to 43 seconds at the intersection with Aspen Hill Road. Other safety improvements are in process, such as the installation of a pedestrian-activated signal at a mid-block crossing on Aspen Hill Road. I received input and support from numerous partners, including Council President Navarro's office and the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. Another aspect of my walking action plan was to organize community walks to bring residents together and talk about traffic safety issues. Councilmember Katz joined me at the second annual walk held in October 2018. Last fall, I presented my Aspen Hill traffic safety efforts and shared tools for making suburban communities more walkable at the American Public Health Association annual conference. And most recently, I have served on the Community Advisory Committee for the Aspen Hill Vision Zero study, which is being led by the Planning Department. To conclude, I'm eager to apply my experience in environmental policy, local government management, and traffic safety to help make our county greener, cut our carbon emissions, and enhance transportation options for residents.
Thank you so much. So what would you say are your top priorities as you would begin this new position?
There are three priorities on which I intend to focus from the get-go. The first is to work with the Department of Environmental Protection staff and other partners to develop a climate action and resilience plan for Montgomery County. In order to meet the county's ambitious goal to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, we need to build on the planning work that has already been done and create a roadmap with prioritized actions in the building and transportation sectors. In addition to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we need to increase the county's resilience and adaptability to a changing climate. We know that we can expect and are already starting to experience hotter and more prolonged heat waves during the summer and more extreme weather events throughout the year, including severe rainstorms that lead to more frequent flooding. We need to develop a better understanding of the vulnerabilities that are specific to Montgomery County, including the residents and populations that are most vulnerable to climate impacts, and then take steps to reduce these vulnerabilities. We need to prioritize the protection of our most vulnerable residents. Government must take a leadership role in implementing policies and investments that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase resilience. So I will work with partners inside and outside county government to identify the resources needed to implement solutions. In an age of constrained budgets, we need to solve for multiple problems at once, to implement interventions that have co-benefits. For example, by installing green infrastructure such as rain gardens in the public rights-of-way, we can improve on-site stormwater management, reduce the heat island effect, as well as provide traffic calming. My second priority area is to expand active transportation options and enhance traffic safety, thereby easing commutes for residents. We need to make it easier and safer for people to go where they need to go. The recently finalized Bicycle Master Plan offers a blueprint for a more connected county. I will work to identify the resources to get the first tier of projects underway, including the Breezeway network. I also plan to work closely with the Department of Transportation staff to ensure that the county's first bus rapid transit line on Route 29 is successfully completed. My third priority area is to have robust community engagement around these issues to enable residents to help shape these plans and actions from the beginning and throughout implementation. I look forward to having conversations with residents from throughout the county on these issues. It takes a team to solve complex problems, and I think that collectively we can come up with the best solutions.
Thank you. So you touched a little bit on how you plan to engage with external partners. Can you talk a little bit more about how would you specifically go about engaging those who don't traditionally participate, as we on the county, both the executive as well as the council, are so focused on issues of equity? So how would you specifically, any ideas of what you might do?
Sure. So with regards to community engagement, as an initial step, I'm eager to reach out to external partners individually and in small groups to have conversations about past planning efforts, to learn about what has worked well and what are opportunities for improvement. I would like to actively include external partners in the development of future climate and transportation plans. One approach to obtain technical input and advice from external partners during the plan development stage is to convene time-limited task forces on specific topics. I think it's important to receive feedback from the public throughout the planning process, not just at the very beginning or the very end. And this can be accomplished by convening open houses in convenient locations to solicit feedback on draft plans, by giving presentations during civic association meetings, and providing opportunities for the public to provide feedback electronically. Specific regard to your question about communities that may not otherwise participate in public meetings, I think it's important to recognize that there are lots of people out there who don't normally have the time or ability to show up to participate in public meetings. And so the key here is to meet people where they are, whether in a physical or in an online setting. For example, I've had success sitting at a bus stop and talking with residents about their traffic safety priorities as they waited for their bus to arrive. I had a captive audience there. And I've also observed some MPD officers who successfully use neighborhood apps, such as Nextdoor, as a way to solicit input from the public. So that's something that I would be interested in looking into.
Thank you. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
Yes, Bank of America does business with Montgomery County, and I need to disclose that in 2016, I took out a loan from Bank of America.
Okay. All right. We do have some follow-up questions or comments. Councilmember Reamer.
Really looking forward to working with you. I really want to compliment you, Andrew, on this nomination. And Adriana, I want to thank you for stepping up and volunteering to serve in this capacity. I think your experience is really just so on point, and I think you're going to do a fantastic job. So,
You will be paid, by the way.
and she will be paid. So we'll get that loan taken care of and off the books, I suppose. Right. I didn't say you were, thank you. Volunteering to step up did not mean volunteering in the job. But anyway, so much to say, but I just want to, I'm really very pleased by your work on Vision Zero and your kind of deeper community connection around that issue. I think you're going to find as you try to tackle it that it's sort of like getting stuck in the mud because of the layers of bureaucracy that are involved in making these kinds of decisions. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's just the reality. And so you're going to really have to persevere there. And I just, we're looking forward to you moving the needle. And it's going to take perseverance, but we need it. It's so important. And I think your personal history there, again, I think will fuel the passion that you're going to need to cut through. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Hochberg, I enjoyed our conversation, and I do want to commend the executive branch for bringing forward 3 highly qualified candidates that certainly reflect the diversity of the communities that you will serve so well and in so many different ways. The steepest learning curve I had coming in, going into the executive branch of Montgomery County was learning the Montgomery County bureaucracy and acknowledging that many of the issues that are tackled by the executive branch are beyond their direct element of control. Park and planning, the Board of Education, our private sector. There's so many complexities to the work and to this job. And I was a little anxious that the 3 ACAO candidates that have been presented have very little experience with Montgomery County government. And so there is going to be a steep learning curve. And the role of the ACAO is critical for department heads because while your immediate task is to advance the agenda of the county executive and the very well articulated goals and objectives of this administration, the practical reality is that you're going to be a firefighter. You're going to be a problem solver, and many of the challenges presented to individual departments go well beyond their element of control. And so you're going to need to be a connector of dots. And I encourage you to be patient, but also lean and leverage the existing experience that you will be able to identify within county government to get through those inevitably challenging times. Our office will, for what it's worth, would love to be a resource in any way we can be to help you, because you have a monumental task of trying to ensure that within the transportation space and our climate space that Montgomery County remains ahead of the curve. But I'm excited about your nomination, and I look forward to working with you in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and congratulations, Ms. Hochberg, for being nominated. And I, too, look forward to working with you. And I agree with what my colleagues have said, that the county executive has sent 3 very fine names forward to us, and I look forward for voting for you. I have to tell you, when we saw each other, and the day we were walking in Vision Zero in Aspen Hill, I never thought that this would be a day that we would be seeing each other in this way. But I'm very pleased that we are. You certainly did a great job that day, and I know you will continue to do it. I also have to tell you, taking pictures of manhole covers and sidewalks, I've done that and thought it was a mistake, but obviously there's a merit here. But we did have a very nice discussion in our office as well. I'm very, very impressed by you, and I was prior to that discussion, but very impressed by you, and I do look forward to voting for you. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. We had the opportunity to sit down yesterday. I really appreciated the conversation. I am very excited about your background, not only as a local community activist and advocate, but as somebody who has really worked particularly on Vision Zero and zero waste efforts in the district, and I hope to bring that expertise to the county, and with Adam Ortiz as DEP director and other leaders in county government really working towards those critical goals, I think it will be very important. I do share some of the comments that were made about the learning curve, and I hope that we all can work together and be a resource for each other. But I am excited to see you in this role, and interested to see how this new model for the ACAOs works in practice in terms of taking on the service areas. This is the one I think I understand the best of how sustainability issues and a green county kind of works across virtually every department in county government. Some of the other ones I'm still interested to see how they end up working in practice. And this is probably more for Mr. Klein, but would be great if we could get a copy of the specific breakdown of which ACAO is going to be responsible for which areas, and how that delineation of responsibility will work. Because, as my colleague Councilmember Albernoz mentioned, one of the key areas of the ACAO is to be a person to turn to for issues as they arise, so that the small brush fire doesn't turn into the issue that can burn the entire house down. And so understanding who the right person is to turn to in that moment when it is needed, and have that responsiveness, I think is going to be really important, not just for the department heads and other leaders in county government, but frankly for us council members as well.
Happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve. I know we'll be working closely together with the Transportation and Environment Committee. Great nomination, Andrew. I think everything's been said, but I really look forward to working closely with you. I'm glad to hear that some of your constituent requests were heeded and addressed, and I predict that more of them will be addressed in the future. I think it's great to have somebody with your background, both as an environmental advocate and a pedestrian safety advocate, because navigating that bureaucracy is a vexing experience for so many of our advocates, and it'll be nice to have somebody in the bureaucracy who will be their champion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I enjoyed our conversation yesterday, and just wanted to quickly share 2 points. One, I appreciate my colleague, Councilmember Albernaz's point about the large bureaucracy that we have here. And as someone who worked in it for a number of years, you know that road. But I'll spin it a little bit and say I look forward to fresh perspectives on how to make it better. And so I know that you and the other 2 ACAOs will be relatively new or new to county government. And so that fresh perspective, figuring out how we can make our government work even better with the resources that we have, will be welcome. And then regarding your portfolio, having more information about how all 3 ACAOs will be working together to manage this bureaucracy, it will be great. But regarding the 2 items that you talked about, the greener county and easier commutes, in this county, over the last number of years, we've had 50 pedestrian deaths here in the county. And with the climate action plan and global warming getting worse, both issues that are in your portfolio have to be fixed as soon as possible. And we'll be looking to you for your leadership in that regard, and I look forward to working with you on that.
Okay, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So in focusing on the environment, one of the things that oftentimes is missed is our agricultural reserve. That is a large portion of my county. My farmers who are there, who continue to do their best from a land stewardship perspective and the relationships that we have. And so I would encourage you as soon as possible to make sure that you establish relationships with our Ag Advisory Board, as well as Montgomery County ag producers and others that are there who continue to partner with the county in figuring out ways that we can continue from a land stewardship and environmental stewardship model to continue to further some of the goals that you espouse. I think that also when it comes to the transportation piece, would encourage you to spend some time in the Up County. Certainly as we talk about Vision Zero, the issues that are prevalent in the Down County are not always the same as what we see in the Up County areas. And so, please feel free to reach out to my office to help coordinate some of those, because I think that, again, as Councilmember Navarro was talking about oftentimes some of the folks who aren't heard from and who aren't engaged, and we know that oftentimes is our people of color and folks of lower socioeconomic status, but let me throw another layer on top of that, the people who are farthest away from county government. And so that's a lot of our people that are in either East County or in the Up County areas, who it's just too far to come down to Rockville or to Silver Spring to a community meeting, who you won't hear from, but who we need to start incorporating in terms of the decisions we make. And so I encourage and look forward to working with you and making sure that we can encompass all of those voices.
Okay, well, Ms. Hochberg, this has been, I think, a very important conversation. I'm glad that also we had the opportunity to meet with you beforehand to go more in depth in terms of what you hope to do, and we really do appreciate and commend County Executive Elridge for sending you over as somebody who's very, very well immersed in our community. I think that's a huge strength that you bring to this position. So we will adjourn, and we'll be back for public hearing at 1:30, and then we will vote this afternoon. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing on zoning text amendment 19-02, clinics limited use. This CTA would allow medical and dental clinics as a limited use in residential zones, establish standards for medical and dental clinics as a limited use in residential zones, and generally amend the provisions concerning medical and dental clinics. A Fed committee work session on this ZTA is tentatively scheduled for Monday, March 4th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business on February 27th. And we have 7 speakers. We have Mr. Casey Anderson from Montgomery County Planning Board. We have Jenny Wei from Individual, Mohammed Nadim Ahmad from the Islamic Center of Maryland, Abdul Sheikh, Jawad Bashir, Salim Akhtar, and Mr. Casey Caseman. So if you all want to come forward as I've called your name, and Mr. Russ is here instead of Mr. Casey Anderson, I believe. Is that right?
I think so.
Playing the part, but not quite him. Okay, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. For the record, Greg Russ from the Montgomery County Planning Board. The Planning Board did hear this CTA at its meeting on last Thursday and voted unanimously to provide the following comments. In general, the Planning Board has no objection to allowing a clinic in an accessory capacity in these large residential care facilities, charitable and philanthropic institutions, large daycare centers, and private educational institutions or places of worship. The Planning Board believes that the legislation should be clarified that the accessory use must also adhere to the minor amendment provisions of a conditional use or special exception as applicable to the principal use in the cases where those are being accessory to those conditional or special exceptions. CTA 1902 would allow accessory use clinics that are limited in size in all residential zones. In zones where such clinics are currently allowed as conditional principal uses, which are the R200, R90, R60 zones, the standards for the use would be unchanged. The board is unclear why the limited accessory use provisions for 4 or less medical practitioners would not also apply to these zones, and therefore recommends that the land use table include an L for limited, along with the C for conditional for clinics up to 4 medical practitioners in these residential zones. And finally, where a clinic would be accessory to a permitted principal use, it would be more difficult to objectively determine that the clinic is an accessory use. Again, the board believes that the 5% or less of the floor area of the principal use requirement should be also included for those medical practitioners of 4 or less. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russ. Is Jean Way here? Nope. Okay, Mohammed Nadeem Ahmad.
Thank you very much, Council President Nancy Navarro. Good afternoon and peace to all of the council members. We really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Nadeem Ahmed. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of Islamic Center of Maryland, located at 19411 Woodfield Road, Gaithersburg. We are just a half mile north from Air Park Road, and we are on the stretch of the road that has 2 major churches also on each side of ICM, Interdenominational Church of God and Church of the Redeemer. Council members, ICM has been looking into providing free healthcare services to those in need for some time. We have explored this more than once in the past, including with Mobile Med of Rockwell. We explored this opportunity. Because of our limited space, as we have in the existing buildings that we use as of now, we were not able to pursue this any further. In 2016, ICM embarked upon constructing its multipurpose 45,000 square feet story building, which you can see over here. This is the picture of this constructed structure. The building structure has been completed and the interior finishing is now in progress. In it, we have dedicated for a free clinic space with up to 4 exam rooms and other required space and features. On my left, you will see this prop, which has the second floor where you will see in one of the front locations, the red bubble. I'm sorry, I can't look at it. But that is the space that we have dedicated for the clinic. Under the current zoning RE1, we are not allowed to have this type of operation in any of our buildings. Other very similar zones, R200, allow this operation under conditional use. We believe that a zoning text amendment in this regard is therefore the most appropriate action to enable ICM move forward with its plan of implementing a free clinic in its new building. It is pertinent to note that this ZTA will benefit all religious and charitable organizations and not just ICM. Moreover, the stipulations within the ZTA carefully take care of the public interest, including location and adjoining facilities. ICM's location meets all of these conditions. To conclude, healthcare issue is a serious concern for all people at all levels of our society. This is critical for the underprivileged and uninsured. Many organizations are providing these services, and ICM will only expand this. This amendment will further support this cause by enabling ICM and other organizations, and therefore, I am requesting the council to approve this amendment so that ICM can move forward. Thank you very much for your consideration. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abdul Sheikh.
Yes, my name is Abdul Sheikh, and I'm not representing any organization. I just wanted to tell you my personal experiences. I work with the refugees, and when they come here, they do not get the Medicaid right away. So I have run into situations where nowhere to go, where to take them. I have to beg the physicians. Then I work as a project manager on this construction building, and I work with the Latinos from Guatemala, Mexico, Salvador, and in this winter I saw them sick, but they will not go to a physician. They will wait until they're really sick, and then they end up in the hospital. Then we have people who are homeless. Then we have people who are just visitors in this county, and they avoid going to the physician because they can't pay. And then when they get really sick, they go to the hospital. And I found, once I was in the hospital, I remember this very distinctly. There was a guy who was homeless, and they examined him, and they said, okay, and they sent a taxi, gave him a taxi to go to the homeless shelter without any follow-up. So, based on my personal experiences, I feel additional community clinics will be helpful. The physicians are volunteers, the nurses are volunteers, and it will save, in the end, Montgomery County money. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jawed Bashir.
Good afternoon. My name is Javed Bashir.
Mr. Bashir, can you please lift the microphone so we can hear you very there
Good
you
afternoon. My name is Javed Bashir, and I'm a county resident for the last 30-some years or so. I just live about 10 minutes from here. And the reason I'm here today is to tell you some real-life experience of that the community clinics like we have right now on New Hampshire Avenue called MCC Clinic. I'm a board member of the clinic, and I can share with you some of the experiences I have. The clinic started in 2003. It's been over 15 years now that the clinic started. Just to add on to what Mr. Sheikh said, it's absolutely true that a lot of people it's a very diverse community that Montgomery County, people have come here from all over the world. It's a lot of it takes time for people to integrate into the culture and all that. So when people come here and they get sick, and sometimes they bring their parents and all that, and who don't want to see a doctor in a foreign environment, they want to be comfortable with somebody that they can basically share their problems. And that's how we started. The reason started the MCC clinic was basically that reason. Now there were some dedicated people who actually expanded that thing, and now it's a full-fledged clinic which is really offering a lot of services to the Montgomery County people who really need this clinic, this kind of thing. And the number of people are kind of growing, that we started with very few people who used to come there and facilities. I can tell you that it's needed for the community, this kind of organization. And you'll be surprised to see, even in a Muslim community, by name it's Muslim Community MCC, but most of the patients are non-Muslim patients. You have to understand that too. So all I will say it's a needed thing. You meeting some community that requires this kind of attention, and that MCC clinic provides that. And I would urge people to come start more based on meeting people's requirements and people's needs and all that. And I urge you to actually to facilitate this request from the ICM.
Thank you very much. Salim Akhtar here. Okay, so we proceed with Mr. Casey Caseman. Mr. Caseman, yeah.
Thank you. Casey Caseman, Interfaith Community Liaison in the Office of Community Partnerships. It's been my pleasure to work with ICM now for some 6 years, and speaking not only for them but for the Muslim community as a whole here in Montgomery County. Their charitable contributions are, I'd suggest, beyond compare, and one of the hidden secrets that deserves a lot more attention. This afternoon, I want to commend your office, Madam President, for expediting this and for the co-sponsorship of Craig Rice and his office. We keep running into these surprises, and thanks again to Park and Planning. This thing has been moved forward as quickly as it possibly could, and I'm confident this afternoon all of you will be voting in favor of this amendment. One of the things I've done in the process of learning of this is to be, it hasn't happened yet, it takes a while to get the head people from Permitting Services and Healthy Montgomery and the Primary Care Coalition. But we're going to be doing that in order that other faith communities, some of whom right now are running kind of clinics kind of on their own, understand what all of the requirements are, but in particular become qualified for funding. Because after this is done this afternoon, they're still going to need to comply with other rules and regulations that wouldn't be known unless we get in front of that and make that public, and also provide the resources for them to know how to work through that as expeditiously as we are doing this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, there will be a Fed committee work session, which is the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, and that will happen on March 4th. And then it'll come back to full council for a vote. So I just wanted to clarify that. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you very much for your leadership on this issue. I was very happy to be a co-sponsor, but Reverend Caseman, you actually teed it up for me, but my question is for Mr. Ahmad. Right now, we have the ZTA drafted as that the ordinance actually is effective 20 days after the date of council adoption. I know that you've already built the building, and so would you not prefer to have immediate action instead of waiting to have 20 days?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
That's true. It is stopping some of our construction, activities in there.
Excellent.
So that will be tremendously helpful to move
Excellent. So I just give that to Fed Committee for consideration. I also did want to highlight Reverend Caseman and I just came back from Ethiopia, and there we saw the Muslim community continuing to do great work in the community there, offering free education to students, many of whom are orphans. And so we see the continued dedication of the Muslim community throughout the world. And it really says something, and it says something about what I hear oftentimes from Councilmember Albornoz, that we need to continue to work with our communities of faith in making sure we can address a lot of these issues that we're challenged with, whether it's building on educational opportunities or health disparities, all the things that we see, making sure that we don't forget about our faith communities. And I'm happy to see that our faith communities have not forgotten about us. So thank you.
Yes, and to me, this is one example of really what we continually talk about in terms of our extraordinary diversity. And the diversity is not just in terms of ethnic or racial, but it's also in terms of the different faith organizations that live and coexist here in Montgomery County. We are so, so fortunate, and we have so many assets. But the reality is that many of those assets need to be leveraged. And it's because of efforts like these, where all of you have committed to step up and worked so hard to get to this point, and whatever we can do here to push that forward, I think is the least that we can do, because we do have so many vulnerable people out in our communities that, as it was just stated so beautifully, absolutely would prefer to access healthcare through some of these community clinics for very many different reasons. And it does help when it comes to mitigating the cost of using emergency rooms in hospitals as well. So this is a tradition that I think, this council with previous councils began. And I just really appreciate everybody's commitment to making this a reality. So we will be working very closely to make this happen. So thank you so much for being here this afternoon. And so with that, we close this particular public hearing. I want to note that the public hearing for Bill 2-19, Health, Lead in Drinking Water Schools, was postponed so it could be heard with the public hearing on the companion health regulation that was introduced this morning. So that's the only reason why this was postponed. And so for item 8, this is a public hearing on amendment to the FY 19 to 24 Capital Improvements Program, Department of Transportation for the Street Tree Preservation Program. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. And I don't believe we have any speakers, so the public hearing is closed. And for that, then, I need a motion and a second. It was moved by Councilmember Katz and seconded by Councilmember Reamer, and Dr. Orland is here. Is there anything you need to add?
No, this was recommended by the committee back in January, so.
Okay, awesome. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, so that is unanimous among those present. Thank you so much. Great. So now we have concluded all of our public hearings, and we're going to go right into our next item, which item number 9, which is an interview for County Executive's appointee as Director of Procurement, Mr. Ash Shetty. And I do see that that Delegate Shetty is here as well. So we welcome you and acknowledge your presence. And I'm sure you're here to be cheering on a particular person that's about to be interviewed. So we welcome you.
As a delegate, she comes for all of her constituents.
She does. I mean, this is true representation. Okay, authentic representation. Absolutely. We appreciate you being here. All right, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Klein.
Good afternoon, Madam President, members of the council. I'm Andrew Klein, the Chief Administrative Officer, and very happy this afternoon to present to you Ash Shetty for confirmation as Director of the Office of Procurement. Most of you have met with Ash in the last couple of weeks. The county executive and I believe that county government needs to take a new and different approach to procurement. Ash has worked with the procurement teams of large public and private organizations around the world to improve strategy, deploy technology, speed up business processes, and measure performance. He has ideas for turning procurement from a frustrating bureaucracy into a partner in delivering better results for the dollars spent and expanding opportunities for minority and local business. And I'm looking forward to having him as part of the leadership team. I will turn it over to Madam President to ask questions.
Great. Okay, Mr. Shetty, so I do have a number of just questions, standard questions, and then we'll open it up to discussion with my colleagues. So number 1 is, how will you evaluate the Office of Procurement and determine what resources are needed to assist departments in awarding more timely contracts?
Thank you for that question, Council President. Just for the record, my legal full name is Avinash Shetty. I go by Ash Shetty. As far as your question goes, I should say that a big part of what I do professionally right now is go into organizations, find inefficiencies, and root them out. The approach that I take in such situations, that I intend to take here for the county as well, is one where I first understand not only the process as it is represented in documents and understood by the procurement staff, but also by talking to other stakeholders involved in this process. So besides understanding how the procurement team currently sees activities that are important versus their ability to execute on it successfully and what impediments they're facing, and again, doing this using a very exhaustive checklist of activities that procurement functions typically conduct. I also want to talk to our vendors. I want to talk to folks who are on the receiving end of our bureaucracy to understand what delays them when it comes to working with our county's procurement department. There are probably requirements that we have that cause them to delay the process just as much as our own team is probably overwhelmed with inefficiencies that, like I said, I will identify. And then the last part of it is I also want to understand the using departments and their expectations. At the end of the day, some of this comes down to also just better communication, more transparency, and having them, if you'll permit me to use an analogy, in the old days when you sat in a taxi, you didn't know whether the driver was taking you for a ride, has gone taking you off the highway to get the meter to run up. I would very surreptitiously use my cell phone to navigate where the person was taking me to make sure that I wasn't, but I would do it on silent because I didn't want to offend the person. The truth is now with technology that Uber uses, you get an estimate of how long it's going to take you to get the drop before you even sit in the car. You may decide to take the metro instead if that's the faster way for you to get there. Once you're in the car, should anything change, you're immediately alerted on your phone to manage your expectations in terms of what's going to happen. That's exactly how we could be doing things as well. We could be setting expectations up front, discussing the route that we're going to take, choosing an alternative vehicle if that's what makes sense for the using department. So we're managing their expectations in terms of timeliness, but we're doing it in a way that I don't think we've done before here in the county. But ultimately, should anything change, we'd keep that open dialogue so that they understand how things are unfolding, and this way nobody is left feeling like we weren't able to deliver in a timely manner. But those would be the methods by which I'd go about understanding the needs, and then again, I can spend some time talking about specific changes to process that would be necessary. We'll spend some time looking at technology, which I think is something we will definitely need. And my thoughts on technology are simply to free up bandwidth in the team and the staff so that they can be more proactive rather than reactive. Another cause for delay could simply be that when they get something, it's the first time they're looking at it and they're basically trying to get their ducks in a row. But if you freed up time for them to anticipate rather than react to the needs of the using departments, they would have the ability to get things done that much quicker. So it's obviously not something that I could articulate in any way in great detail in 5 minutes, but hopefully this gives you a sense of how I want to go about it.
So can you expand a little bit more on just your experience in process reengineering and creation of innovative solutions to improve organizational internal procurement systems and processes? I know you started already alluding to that, but anything else that you can share with us?
Yes, absolutely. So the one example that I shared with you, and this is as much related to process as it is to managing expectations, is simply having devices that allow us to communicate with our using departments exactly what's going on the back end, so it doesn't feel like when you send something to procurement, it's been received by a black box and you don't know what's happening. And that's not even re-engineering the process, that's just demystifying the process, allowing them to understand what we're up to and why. But beyond that, I've worked with clients of mine in the past on various measures to find efficiency in their processes. So for example, there was a client I was working with which was basically applying a peanut butter approach to due diligence in every single buy that was presented to the procurement department. In other words, they were treating everything like it was, the most critical, the most risky proposition they were getting into. What I essentially put in place was what TSA PreCheck does, which is you identify opportunities up front for where you don't need to put as much effort and do as much due diligence as typical. You separate the known from the unknown. You take opportunities to not go through every single step of the process where you can quantify the risk and accept it. And this way, you create process maps where you have a color-coded system where if certain criticality criteria or risk criteria are not being met, then you don't need to go through every single step in the process. You can actually short cycle some of the steps, or you can just acknowledge that in the interest of timeliness, or whatever the priority may be, we're gonna go faster. And then in other cases, you know that you absolutely have no choice. You're going to have to go through every single step of the process because you've identified that up front, and that's what we've done with this one airline company. Another example of where I was able to, and I'll share this one and stop. Another example of where I was able to find efficiencies, again, by re-engineering the process is I was working with a team that was predominantly following the process and just trying to get things done in the way they were supposed to be done. While that is good, again, from a check-the-box perspective, it doesn't necessarily help your using departments, or as I refer to them, the business partners, achieve their end goals. What we need to do, and what I have done previously, is rather than having staff that are aligned to activities, have staff that are aligned to commodities, where they start to understand trends, what we call cost drivers, where they start to understand the business's needs, anticipate the business's needs so they can steer those in a different direction sooner rather than later. And again, this takes a massive overhaul. It even requires you to understand the capabilities and skill sets of the individuals on the team, because not everybody is going to be a good liaison to the business, to the using departments. But at the end of the day, it's horses for courses, and we need to find the right people to do the job that they're supposed to do. And those, again, would just be a few examples of how I have re-engineered processes or even responsibilities to get things done.
Okay, so what initial thoughts do you have on the role of the Office of Procurement in business development for local, small, and minority businesses?
Thank you for that question. So when I met with the few of you who I met with, I had walked you through my little procurement strategy document here. Some of you kept it and hopefully used it to share with your staff and folks who are interested. But just of all the things that I'd spoken about in my procurement strategy document, I think the most heavily discussed, and in terms of the number of ideas I had for how we can change it, was the question you just asked me. I believe that we have not only an opportunity but a responsibility to be part of the community in helping with supplier diversity and supplier development. So when it comes to how we might be able to use the Office of Procurement to help develop local and small minority businesses, I have a few ideas here that I just want to share with you. First and foremost, I think we need to raise our goals. What we've set for ourselves right now, and we've not even achieved the 25% for MFD, is something that we could definitely do better with, considering the state of Maryland is even doing better than us, and we are a more diverse community than the state is on the whole. As it relates to the local small business reserve program, what I am able to understand is that we've set aside 20%, but of that we've only achieved about 23%, which means we've not even come close to achieving what we've set aside. Now, I do need clarification on that, which, by the way, is part of the problem. I wish this information was easier for somebody who's been practicing it for 10 years to understand, and it's not. But at the end of the day, I think that we need to do a better job of setting higher targets for ourselves and then taking the right measures to achieve them, which I'll talk some more about. I also think that these targets should become management business objectives of the different managers. This should be something that we don't just offer lip service to, but actually affects how our performance is evaluated. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just something that we can talk about when probed, but not actually do anything about. I think this is important for all vendors, but particularly the local small business owners, minority small business owners, is we need to have a better debrief mechanism for failed bidders. When they go through the trouble of participating in our process, which again, like I alluded to, probably has a higher barrier to entry than it should, when they don't succeed, it's very easy for them to give up on it, say the whole thing is fixed. In fact, somebody just told me that while I was waiting. It kind of gives me a sense of what I'm signing up for. But the truth of it is, if somebody goes through the trouble to participate in our process, then we owe it to them to want to come back again. Because every time somebody loses hope or feels that the system is rigged and goes away, not only is it bad for our brand, whether it's reality or perception, it doesn't matter because that is what people believe. But it's also bad for our county because the next time we will have fewer people participating in events, and that means we'll have to take the one option that we have, and that furthers the impression that we're entrenched. But frankly, we're being held hostage because we don't have anybody else to turn to because nobody else wants to work with us. So I think that we need to do a better job of keeping people engaged, even if they don't succeed in our procurement process by doing better debriefs. And also maybe taking our protest process more seriously, maybe giving it greater visibility. I feel like right now our elected officials have become the de facto forum for protest. If somebody is unhappy about how things went, then they come to you. When in reality, we should have a process that is strong enough and carries enough weight that you can comfortably point them to that and know that the right actions will be taken. So that'll be another suggestion that I have in that regard.
And then more specifically, when it comes to increasing minority participation, what would you do to create more opportunities for them to be prime contractors?
So these two questions sort of go hand in hand a little bit, but I do have some very simple things that I almost wonder why we haven't done them already. That we could do right off the bat, right off the boat. So the first thing is understanding our current spend and finding opportunities that are low risk, low criticality, but high dollar, where we could actually more consciously be trying to find suppliers, developing them, and then giving them prime contracts. I noticed that we had a rather large contract in place right now for office supplies, but that would be a great example of something where I don't necessarily know that the using departments would be upset if the source of the paper they were using was one company versus another. But if we could steer that spend towards minority, female, disabled-owned businesses, if we could use those low-hanging fruit as opportunities with low risk for us to just get more people in the door, I think that would be helpful. I think we could do more when it comes to outreach. Obviously, we should be leveraging Montgomery College, but we should also be leveraging groups like Casa de Maryland to get people to understand what opportunities are out there for them. We could even be using the Office of Community Partnerships that is engaged with these same, and I mean, we're paying for both anyway.
Yes.
We might as well be partnering with them better so that they understand that some of their constituents, some of the folks they're talking to would benefit from some of the opportunities that we have. So in addition to what we already have, I think there are some easy wins that are just waiting for us to reach out and grab. And to my knowledge, we've never tried what I just described. The last thing I have, which is a little bit more ambitious, and again, I say last only because it's what I was able to pull from my relatively lengthy list, is I think we could also do a better job of having existing vendors serve as mentors to these fledgling, these new vendors who we want to bring on board, especially when it comes to the daunting process that we have in terms of the entire what I call barriers to entry in terms of our requirements. I think we could have larger companies help these minority-owned companies understand how to navigate the system better. We could, besides doing that, my more ambitious plan is to see if in the long run I can figure out a way to get funding for minority-owned vendors who have got contracts with the county, but literally now just need the funding to be able to deliver. In theory, we owe them the money anyway. Why can't we help them get access to easier credit so that they can deliver on those and bigger projects in the long run? So essentially, we're serving as an incubator. We're helping them develop so that they can do more business with the county in the future.
Thank you. I really appreciate you connecting both community partnerships as well as the incubator concepts within this particular question, because it is so true that we do have different assets and resources in different places, and for some reason they're not leveraged when at the end of the day they're there to support all of these goals. So I appreciate that. Also, a lot of what I hear you talk about seems to be referring to a culture change, right? And it's all about change management. And so can you talk a little bit about how will you accomplish that? Because you need to make sure that the people that you have around you that are working in this department, et cetera, buy into this culture change, if you will. And that's how we can then, be able to realize the outcomes that we're looking for. So any initial thoughts on how you would start to implement that?
Right. So this is perhaps the hardest thing that any leader has to do, right? You're now making a play for the hearts and minds of people, not just how they're spending their time. And I have a few suggestions that I'll share with you. Again, this is a much bigger endeavor that I can quickly communicate, but maybe some of the more newsy things that I would like to try to do. First and foremost, I think as a team, we need a new mission, vision, and values statement. The mission statement that's currently in place, I'm sure is good, but it's not memorable. It doesn't actually fire people up around any mission. I doubt that most of the staff on the team even know what that mission statement is, and it's supposed to be meant for them. I envision a mission statement, a vision statement, and a values framework that not only resonates with the team, but also with the using departments and our vendors, who should also buy into that vision that we as a group have. So this is bringing a lot of people together under just one sort of, credo. The other thing that I think needs to be done for the team's sake is procurement in any organization is a lot like the CIA. When you're doing your job, most of the time people aren't fully sure what you do. But when something goes wrong, then everybody is like, why weren't you on top of this? Why couldn't you see this coming, right? That's what happens. So our function's brand is built on our failures, not on our successes. And that cannot be good for morale. That cannot be inspiring to the people who are basically only as good as the last time they were in trouble. And frankly, the shelf life of their success is very short. It's what have you done for me lately? Because I still remember the time you dropped the ball.
That sounds like serving on the county council.
It's probably true.
That's why it sounds familiar. Just kidding.
Welcome to the CIA. So one of the things that I want to do is a better job of celebrating our wins, celebrating the things that we do that people don't even realize are getting done. And I think that is good for morale. It lets people take pride in what they're already doing that currently they're just being taken for granted for doing.
Great.
One more last piece, because this is like my I guess my pet topic, is technology. The fact of it is our team does not have a choice. They're out of time. If I were talking to a private sector client right now, I would be telling them in 3 to 5 years, technology is going to displace the routine, repetitive work that procurement does. It may take us 10 years to get there, but the point is that anybody whose career is expected to span longer than 10 years is going to find themselves made redundant because of technology that can do the job that people currently do. I think that the people who see this, who don't stick their head in the sand, and pretend that this isn't going to affect them, will actually want to come with me, because what I'm going to be bringing to them is the opportunity to build relationships with their stakeholders, to not just react to the needs of the county, but anticipate them, to do things that artificial intelligence cannot do, because AI can't tell a story and build a relationship. AI cannot build coalitions and get people excited about things. So the folks on the team who are up for that are really going to enjoy the time they spend with me.
Great. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
None that I can think of.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we do have some lights. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And Mr. Shetty, let me just say that I don't know if I've been more excited about an appointment that's come over from a county executive in a long time. And one of the reasons why is because Council President Navarro and I have been banging our heads against a concrete wall over and over again when it comes to procurement and what we can try and do to really right this ship. We have continuously heard from our communities of color, from our communities of women and disabled who own businesses here in the county, who continue to struggle, and many who I'm sure you've talked to who've thrown their hands up and said, I give up. These are people who do business with surrounding entities and just don't do business with Montgomery County, and that is not acceptable. And I was very happy to hear that that's a key tenet and something that you find also is not acceptable. We can do better, we must do better, and if we truly are to talk about the equity that we have within this county, what you've just told us about is a key tenet of that. And so I just really want to say thank you for really acknowledging and understanding and getting what is a core tenet of this community that we've lacked for a very long time. So I am looking forward to enthusiastically raising my hand to see you as our next director.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
So, Mr. Shetty, I'm a big fan of your beautiful family, and it's been exciting to get to know you in a professional capacity, and I really did enjoy our conversation a couple of weeks ago. I do think, as Councilmember Rice alluded to, that you are perfectly positioned to take the Office of Procurement in an exciting direction, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that you're inheriting a fantastic staff with really dynamic and engaged men and women, but who have been asked to do more and more with less and less. And so those ancillary agencies that are so critical to the success of government have taken their fair share of hits over the years because of the economic challenges in the county. And I think you'll find a lot of people ready and willing to step forward, but will need the support from a resource perspective to be able to carry that out and carry it out effectively. And there's a lot I know they would like to do in the way of proactive engagement with department heads and departments to problem solve, but it often ends up being a lot of just firefighting. And so I think that there's a real opportunity there to work collaboratively with your staff. And I appreciate the change management question, Council President Navarro, because I had the same question, and I think you answered it well. I do just have two suggestions as you go into this important position. One is to seek stronger collaborations with the offices of procurement of MNC, PPC, and our Board of Education and MCPS. I think there is great opportunity to more align within just county government as a whole some of the procurement structures that can take better advantage of economies of scale and leverage the precious resources that we have. There are reasonable barriers to making that happen, but I think with your innovation, we can overcome those strategies to really be able to connect with other agencies. And I also suggest that within just the executive branch, it's hard to have time to catch your breath because you're just running from one issue to the next, but spending some time intentionally and creating a time and space for departments to get together to talk about procurement-related issues and opportunities that are out there, you'll have a unique, fresh perspective coming in that will give you even more credibility. And I suggest you take advantage of that capital going in because you'll be able to get a lot done. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that you're going to find as soon as you come on board. But look forward to voting for you and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Ash, for being willing to do this and for putting yourself out there and for taking the time for us to talk about this job and for showing up with a strategic plan for the role that you'd be taking on. It was incredibly impressive and demonstrated the seriousness and the thoughtfulness with which I think you're approaching this job. And I also am a big fan of your families, and I hope that I could be your second favorite local elected official. But you know, I still have work to do for that probably too. Yeah, and your vision and your values and your passion for this work is palpable, and it's really refreshing. It's not something that I think most people would associate with a procurement department, but I think that it is something that is needed, perhaps most in a procurement department, because it's something that is really at the heart of how we get goods and services and provide for those in our community who need the things that government does, and it really touches every aspect of county government. And so it's really encouraging. I spent a lot of time at the state level doing procurement and being involved in procurement at various levels, and I think it's really encouraging for the amount of times that you talked about the lack of competition having a cost. and your interest in ensuring that we do have competition, and not just the lowest price, but the type of competition, which I think speaks to the women-owned, minority-owned, disability-owned businesses and local small businesses, because just having the same incumbents bidding against each other for the same contracts, you don't get different approaches to provide goods and services, and you don't necessarily get a cost savings to taxpayers. And so I really appreciate that, and I think you bring a great perspective in the private sector as well, and I hope that not only through the procurement department that you have an opportunity to really be a change agent there, but I hope that you'll also be a key person in the senior levels of the administration to look at ways to more efficiently do better things with limited amounts of money as we face that. And as the outcomes-based budgeting, Mr. Klein, that you're looking at implementing, I think Mr. Shetty will be a tremendous asset across county government, not just in the Office of Procurement, but beyond. So I am extremely excited. I share the comments of my colleagues. I look forward to working with you to make Montgomery County government as inclusive as possible, as efficient, effective, and responsive as possible. And I really appreciate your willingness to serve.
Thank you,
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Shetty, I'm excited about your candidacy, and I'm excited about the new ideas that you have already shared with us and the numerous ideas that you'll bring to light ahead. And it's that play on light and dark. You mentioned the black box that some view this department as. And I will attest to that because when, in a previous life, when I was an executive director working with the county, we had to go through the Department of Procurement. And the problem was the contract that was written for my organization had some problems. And I pleaded with the county. I pleaded with the leaders of that department and said, I can't execute this contract in the way you've designed it. And the problem was it was a cookie cutter design and sent to me, and no modifications could be made. And after pleading for months and months, that contract was signed, and I want to share this with my colleagues, 1 week before the end of the fiscal year. It was a problem. Thankfully, we weren't fully reliant on that for operating under an entire fiscal year, but that was the problem I had with the department a number of years ago. It can't operate that way. And there are so many businesses, not nonprofits, but real businesses operating outside of some of this scope that would love to work with the county. They've thrown their hands up and given up because the processes, the nature of some of the discourse is unfriendly. And I know that you know this. I'm saying this so that my colleagues can hear it and so that it's on the record that there are some real problems. And so what I'm excited about is your understanding that one size doesn't fit all. You've alluded to that, you've said it. And working with you over the next number of years, shining some light on these processes so that we find efficiencies, can make our systems more modern, and do the business that we want to do, that we have to do, and under your leadership that we're capable of doing. So I look forward to supporting you.
Thank you. Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, and Madam President, and congratulations, Mr. Shetty. I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said. I, too, am excited, and I, too, look forward to voting for you. I thought your answers were very well thought out, and you know, Montgomery County procurement, and I know this is no surprise to you, can be the very amount of business that keeps a small business in business or makes a small business whole so that it can stay or develop. And I'm a strong proponent of trying to buy locally whenever possible, and I know that you are as well. But I do have to tell you, it's the first time in my life that I've ever had the peanut butter approach and the CIA mentioned in the same breath. So anyhow, congratulations.
Councilmember Reamer.
Looking forward to working with you, Ash. You're taking on a very tough job. This is one of probably the hardest senior positions in local government that I can think of. And we're all pulling for you and look forward to working with you. And thanks for stepping up. So congratulations to you and to Delegate Shetty as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hooker.
Ash, likewise, echo everything all my colleagues have said. You know, I have had a lot of thoughts about the need for reform in the procurement department for a number of years, and I'm really not just pleased to see you here, but relieved to see you here, and very much looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think this concludes the interview, but I'm just going to have you stay there. The two of you, I'll ask Ms. Hochberg to come forward because we're going to move right into action. Okay. So we are now going to proceed with action. First is Ms. Adriana Hochberg, who has been appointed as Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. I need a motion to confirm. Vice President Katz. It's been seconded by Councilmember Reamer. We'll take turns. Want to say that I do appreciate you stepping up in your role, both as somebody who's worked so hard in your community, but also with extraordinary expertise. I have to say that when I was listening to your interview and you spoke about coming to the United States and learning English at age 10, I could really relate because that's also when I learned English, and really did appreciate you sharing how that experience has really helped you in really navigating different spaces, and I think it's also helped me. So I do relate to that, and I think you bring extraordinary capacity and skill sets to the administration. So with that, all those in favor of confirming the county's executive... nomination of Adriana Hochberg as Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous amongst those present. Congratulations. So next we have County Executive's appointment of Ash Shetty as Director of the Office of Procurement. Is there a motion to confirm? Councilmember Friedson has moved and Councilmember Rice has seconded. And I can just say that I had the opportunity and pleasure of meeting your amazing wife a long time ago. I think when you just moved here, I think it was District 18 Breakfast Club or something like that. Look where she is now, really serving the state and the county very well, but had not had an opportunity to talk to you necessarily, and I was literally blown away by the conversation that we had, because a lot of times we talk about where we need to go in the county and how to take the county to the next level. And I honestly felt very inspired when you were describing what you want to do and your energy, and I could not, really thought of a better person for this position. So I do congratulate the team there at County Executive Elridge's choice here. So for that, all those in favor of confirming the County Executive's nomination of Ash Shetty as Director of the Office of Procurement, they already rose their hands, so this is this is unanimous among those present. Congratulations. All right, so with that, colleagues, we're adjourned to 7:30 this evening for public hearing. Thank you.